It's 2:00 and this meeting is called to order. Roll call, all of our trustees are here except for trustee Robinson. She couldn't make it. And our director is here and our business manager is here and your treasurer. All right, so now if everyone can stand for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, and next we'll be moving into public comment. Speakers, state your name and community and speak for no more than 3 minutes. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe a level of civility and decorum appropriate for a public meeting. No personal attacks or disruptions from audience members will be tolerated. So first up, we have Jeff Webb.
Oh, there's me again, Jeff Webb, Los Alamos. I wanted to take issue with the recent op-ed to the Tuesday Journal. It began with sarcasm, which is unseemly for an elected official. As an elected official, you represent everyone in the district, not just those that walk like you, talk like you, and think like you. Regarding Jefferson's letter to the Baptist, you interpreted it according to your confirmation bias. Recall that many came to the colonies to escape religious persecution or the oppression of church state. And they were of many faiths. And yet they continued their own practice, attempting to establish their own theocracies. The Quakers, the Anglicans, the Lutherans, all tried to impose their own will and way. Virginia attempted to appease King George by declaring faith with the Church of England and made it unlawful to practice Roman Catholicism. Your quotes are accurate. They leave out a lot of context. Jefferson and Adams disagreed vehemently. As strife escalated between the Jefferson Republicans and the Federalists. The Bible-free government, you ask? Which Bible? There's over 100 versions in print today. Would you accept another set of scriptures? And you do all this under the banner of protecting the children. Does that extend to all children? Books cited by local groups as dangerous are only dangerous because they don't fit the narrative that's desired. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Teresa Burkett.
My name is Teresa and I live in Post Falls. First of all, I'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Next, I want to reiterate what Mr. Walters had stated previously. He said he would follow Idaho Code 1815-17 and the CLN library policies. Let me read to you 1815-17B, subsection 3B. Prior to filing of a cause of action, the minor, parent, or legal guardian has provided written notice to the school or public library asking for the relocation of material. Now let me read from your own request for relocation material. Did a minor obtain the material? Are you the minor? Are you the parent or guardian of the minor? It does not allow any adult to fill out the form or circumvent the process by going directly to the board or Mr. Walters. Again, Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Next we have Suzanne Kearney.
I'm Suzanne Kearney. I live in Post Falls. I just want to congratulate you on the reopening of Post Falls and Apple. I wanted to welcome Trustee Ambersetti, and I also wanted to thank Director Walters for responding to my book donations and relocation requests. Thank you. Joseph Goebbels said, if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes accepted as truth. The so-called read banned books crowd continually repeats half-truths and distortions, claiming that our libraries are on a slippery slope toward Orwellian censorship and dystopian surveillance. In true Orwellian fashion, the propagandists themselves point fingers at the truth tellers. Here are some examples. Protecting children from harmful content is censorship, but endangering them is civil rights. Requiring parents to check out explicit books for their minor children is an infringement of parental rights, but allowing children to access without parental consent is affirming parental rights. Moving an explicit book from the children's to the adult section is banning, but discarding books with traditional values is not. The Bible is violent and obscene, while graphic, profanity-filled descriptions of sexual perversion and assault have literary merit. Promoting traditional values is hate, but promoting hatred of traditional values is love. The library does not own any explicit books, yet minors must retain access to these books for their healthy development. Isolated personal testimonies of the benefits of explicit materials are more valid than robust statistical evidence to the contrary. Encouraging youth to be slaves to their sexual lust is freedom, but promoting healthy sexual limits is slavery. Safeguards for children are extreme, but the absence of boundaries is balanced. Time-tested classics are outdated and modern pop culture drivel is educational. Children must navigate adult content, while adult content is dumbed down to the level of children. Love of God and country is fascist, and cultural Marxism is patriotic. Libraries are for everyone, while new purchases and displays largely leave left. Free speech activists cite the First Amendment while supporting the party of big tech censorship and public-private collusion. Protectors of children are accused of wanting to defund the library, while their freedom-loving opponents threaten potentially costly complaints to the ACLU. And this is the same ACLU that vehemently defends banning books like Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage, which is an expose on the harm that overt sexualization of children is causing. Let's not lose sight of the truth. These people are not fighting for freedom to read banned books, and here's how I know. When the most banned book of all time was read at a board meeting, some of them stomped out in protest like children. The read banned books slogan is a ruse, and the only books they want are the dirty ones, and in so doing, they're corrupting the most vulnerable and innocent among us. Shame on that.
Thank you. Next we have Karen Johnston.
I'll pass.
Okay. Next we have Sharon Alexander.
My name is Sharon Alexander, and I've lived here all my life. I'm thoroughly ashamed of what has happened to our libraries, what you have done to it by shutting it down, first of all, on Sundays. I feel that you are not surveying the whole community and asking them, just like the school district did. They surveyed their public people, asking how they felt about going to school Monday through Thursday and have Friday off. They all agreed. I feel this library has done a disservice to our community. I don't know where you people have come from. I really don't care. I think you need to be looking at our public library. It's our public library, not yours. I think you can also look at the colleges to see if there are students in there that would like to come out and volunteer. Some people say we've had volunteers in here before. They don't know how to do it. It's teaching. It's the word teach, how to do things, not just assume they know how to do it. Give them a credit. It can also come from the high school. Ask them if they'd like to earn a credit to come in here to our library. I see that now you've shut it down at 4 o'clock on Saturday. There's a lot of people that work that would like to come in. We've come in, my husband and I both have, and seen this library full. You put out some kind of a contractor to come in, that costs money. Money I don't think you need to do, to take away from our community library. To come in on a Sunday or a Wednesday and say, oh, there's only 4 people here in the library. You need to shut it down. No, this library needs to be open 7 days a week. Look at your dates, maybe have it start later in the morning and go a little later in the evening. But please do not shut down our library, because you may think it's fine, or your survey person that you've put out thousands and thousands of dollars worth that I don't think you guys can afford. When I'm hearing from other people, you had to go ask for more money. You need to tighten your budget. You need to listen to the people of Post Falls. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Anyone else want to speak? There's still some more time.
You guys are doing a great job. Thank you for the work you've done on just cleaning up the library, keeping it appropriate for kids. Merry Christmas.
Okay. Eric Larich. Right, anyone else? Okay, then we will move on to the next section, which is consent agenda. Have any comments or corrections on that?
Oh,
Pam?
I just had one question. I wasn't sure the terminology, I think it was at the last meeting came out, was inland northwest libraries. I think that came up when we were talking about CIN. I don't recall what that is or who that is, or is it a new name for the CIN or what? So I don't know who the chair would like to have respond to that.
Yes, so CIN is going through a little bit of restructuring. They feel like they needed to correct their status at the state level for the kind of board structure they have. Anyway, as part of that process, there is a desire to rebrand away from CIN to this other name, which is Inland Special Library. So it's a rebranding effort, which is going to coincide with structural changes.
Cassiano?
Just one follow, are there new libraries then joining into the CIN, or is this strictly just a name change and rebranding?
Yeah, there are no new members.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well then, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Consent includes the CIN.
Yes.
I would get confused. I move to accept
In the minutes.
the consent agenda.
Okay, it has been moved to accept the consent agenda. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, it is unanimous and the consent agenda is accepted. We'll now move on to the Community Library Network, November 2024 financial statements. Trustee Henry?
Yes, I have a question down on it's the balance sheet, I believe. Let me see. Yes, on the balance sheet. Going down to the other assets, it says ICS, which I know that's insured cash sweep. What is the 912? And the same thing with regard to the capital asset repair, it has CARIF 3745. Are they just account numbers? I didn't know what those numbers were.
Yeah, they're just account numbers at the bank level.
Okay.
Trustee Fox?
What is
I think we were gonna work on it, but is there a summary of, I'm not sure where to look, but how much is left to pay out? What's been brought in by, insurance payments? We got 2.6 million and we're here at almost at the end of December. There's 1 month left to go. Thought we would have been a lot lower than that in ICS.
Business manager?
Yes, we are close to getting that number figured out. We have reclassified all of the ICRIM income into the income line that you can see in the income statement. And the expenses are all in there as well. We're probably about 90% finished with using the ICRIM funds. And we're also working on figuring out what the carry forward is. We should have that soon.
Ms. Watts?
So 90% is paid out, you know, I think we proved the carry forward is kind of meaningless. Well, I guess it would be important right now because we're just about January. Once the new taxes come in, they're not 50% in January. But I'm still confused how ICS can be 2.6 million when we're hardly a month away from the end of the carry forward.
So I'd like to have the director answer that. We had a really good discussion about emergency funds and we'd like to take from there.
I think if I remember correctly, we had a sort of a speculative report earlier when I first got here, based on the previous business managers' thoughts getting us to the next tax payment. I think in the end, we're actually better off than she projected. So that's one piece of it. Yeah, I mean, the auditor's recommendation for how much we should have in an emergency fund, so it's not really on here.
We can have to see.
Yeah, they want 800, they want 3 months. Oh, yeah, sorry, 2 months. But so we have that, like, we have an amount to provide for long-term debt, that 101,575, which is essentially an emergency fund for like an HR purpose, but we don't have the emergency fund broken out for operational. So it sits in I mean, theoretically, it sits in ICS. It should be about, well, maybe 800, and you had suggested lower number, but even if it was anywhere between that, we have to look at those numbers that's coming out of ICS 912, until such time that we would, I think it'd be appropriate to create a separate fund, which is not the same as necessarily. It's more an operational emergency fund as opposed to a capital. So I think if you look at ICS and you see that high number, it's important to keep in mind that those are certain, eight accounts.
There's 10 different accounts.
Yeah, so 10 different accounts, which holds our operational, gets moved into the Mountain West Bank account at the top of that page for payments. But I just think it's important to keep in mind that whatever number the trustees want to set is emergency operational fund number, whether it's what the auditor suggested at 800 something, or whether trustee classes number, I think give them more. That's where that number sits right now.
Ms. Watts?
But I guess the confusing thing is part of in that ICS is ICRIM payments that haven't been paid out yet. And if it's 90% paid out, are we like 50,000 away, or is that explain an extra $1 million?
Business manager?
So if you think about the 2.6 million that are currently in ICS, there's about 816,000 that are in the emergency fund. Then we have another 200,000 that we still have to pay out for bills for the repairs. And then we have about $400,000 to $500,000 in expenses every month. So as you start to look at that, then it dwindles down. So we don't have a lot of excess, but we're going to get through until the taxes. So we'll have a nice report for you spelling all this out once I get through all of the mini grants that we have to set aside for restricted funds. So there is about $186,000 that people have donated for special reasons that we have to set aside reserve for those reasons. So everything's mixed together in this ICS account, and that's why it's a little confusing. So what the director is proposing is that we actually split this out a little bit more so that you can understand it better. So one idea we're thinking about doing is having a bank open up 3 accounts, because the Federal Reserve will insure up to $250,000. So we want to keep each account under $250,000. So if anything were to happen, the money, the federal would insure that. So we have 3 accounts at $250,000 each. That's $750,000. And that would be kind of set aside as our emergency for operations. And then we're going to have the report once all of the bills are finished for the repairs. That'll knock it down, plus all the expenses for December, plus all the expenses for January. So, we're looking at $500,000 expenses for December, $500,000 in January. So that's $1 million, plus the $200,000 for the rest of the expenses for the insurance funds. And then you have the $800,000 for other emergencies. So does that get you closer to seeing where that money is?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Trustee Hamlin?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I would expect it to be rather telling. Next month, we can see how low did we actually get without the new tax money coming in January. So it'll let us know, we sitting kind of fat or we kind of cutting it close. So, and when it gets to how much reserve we have, I'm in favor of having a lot. I like a big cushion in case there's an emergency.
Trustee Claus?
Well, I disagree with that, because we shouldn't be taking more money from taxpayers than necessary. The guide is 2 months worth. I think that should be the goal instead of just a big cushion. What we need to remember is next meeting, next regular meeting, it'll be as of the end of December. So we'll still be a month behind. So you won't really know the number until the February meeting, right? Because this doesn't have any December expenses in it at all. This is just through November.
Business manager?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Claus, you were correct. February will really be when we plan on giving you a full analysis. Plus the audit is happening in the middle of January. So all of this right now is unaudited, just, basic bookkeeping, but the auditor will be the one that finally says, okay, this is the final number. And her report may or may not be ready by February, but we'll have a much better idea. So February really would be the best expectation rather than next month. Next month we're getting close and we can give you some better idea. Thank you for noticing that.
Okay, there's no further comments or questions. I would entertain a motion to accept the Community Library Network November 2024 financial statements. It has been moved to accept the Community Library Network November 2024 financial statements. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, it is unanimous, and Community Library Network November 2024 financial statements are accepted, and we will now move on to the director's report.
All right, I hope some of the changes to the little brochure have been noticed. We're trying to, like I say, improve it month over month. So we have basically the 3 main sections there: the patron usage, and then circulation of staff, program highlights, and on the back page, called end notes, and that'll kind of fluctuate depending on what we have to report. But I'll just go through it quickly. It's the Apple reopening was obviously in November and a good success. And then similarly, December 9th, we did the Post Falls reopening, many of you were here, so it was also very well received, a lot of exciting buzz in the community, and I think everyone was very pleased with the new layout, the openness that we strive for, and how we sort of redesign the interior of Post Falls. I am working on with my communications department a way to express our gratitude to all the donors and everyone who helped in any way over the whole year. So we'll open and then kick off 2025 with the messaging that we sent out to thank everyone involved. There was certainly a lot of a lot of people who stepped up, both just good quality work of the contractors we had, and plus even the donors and just a lot of different little moving parts to the success of this last year in regards to Apple. The other stats on that page are pretty similar to what we usually have. Put in the numbers for the new PowerPoint, just to make that graph a little bit easier. I did add something on the circulation stats. Just one at the top, which is year to date. I think it's important sometimes just to remember that each of the branches is its own community. And so I wanted to show sort of circulation with the population beside it, right? So, I mean, obviously Hayden and Postwald are the biggest branches, and they have large numbers of search, 71,000, 70. Obviously this year Postwald's a bit different. And if you look at a place like Harrison, you know, or Pinehurst and Maygo, those are smaller libraries. But then if you look at the ratio, you know, it almost works out like 15 items per person at Harrison versus like 4 or 5 items per person at Hayden. So sometimes it's just important to remember how it's almost, I guess, with boxing, if you're lightweight or heavyweight, you still fight within your weight class, and then sometimes you punch above it. But I think it's an important way to look at search stats, sort of add that extra feature of it. But at the branch level, what it is according to the population of those branches. We are a district, but we're also individual branches, you know, in the system. So it's important to keep that in mind. The other stats on that page are pretty much what we've seen. It's the physical items. So physical items is just the books and actual tangible thing. That's searched, and then you have also the total search in November. Then that bottom row is electronic resources. So again, we'll keep tweaking the circulation statistics in this whole brochure. I don't have too much to say about programs at the moment. I just well, I think there's a typo in there. I apologize for that, but I will just say some of the things that I've worked on since the last meeting is sort of an organizational chart here at the CLN. The focus is to create efficiency sort of across all the departments. And so one of the departments I'll be looking at is obviously programming at the CLN. So once I get more into that, I'll be able to provide a little bit more anecdotal beyond what's on the page in the brochure, in the report. But yeah, so the assistant director, she'll be focusing on public services efficiency across the branches. Like I say, I'll be kind of focusing on programs across the CLN. Another important note, what the organizational chart is to help facilitate with the collection development here. I've talked with my collection development and technical services manager, and we've spoken about splitting out that role. It's not really optimal for two very significant operational departments to be combined. So the manager here handles technical services, which is actually a rather big department, directory staff, and collection development, which technically should be its own department. And she also wears a few other hats doing other things important to the organization. So we've talked about that, and it's my intention to explore the potential of a new position for a collection development manager. Speaks to a lot of the work that has to be done with collection development here. So I have nothing to report further than that on that process, but we'll be looking at potential of a collection development manager. And I have on the chart, I've split out the two departments. So I speak of these things as departments, technical services department, collection development department. It's two separate departments in the institution right now. The same person manages both, as it has been here, I think. But the intention is to make those two roles more optimal by being able to attend to them more specifically, without being drawn between such two important operations. But I am happy to report after 3 months that I'm very pleased with my administrative team, so my management team as well. Very confident that the CLN can thrive as an organization, so that is good. Regarding Harrison project, a little bit of a hiccup. Subcontracted concrete company did not follow the plans, what we've been told. As a result, a portion of the ramp needs to be redone to correct slope and dimensions. The facilities manager and I met with the architect and the main contractor just the other day, this week, and we had a good meeting. Main contractor, concurred that it was the concrete pour, and we believe that it can be fixed. They're gonna redo that portion. And they think they can do it within the season. So we're still on target. Changes, but they're looking at it next week, the after. The weather still should be good enough. So I'm hoping that by the next meeting, I can report on the completion of the project. And again, that's just one section of the ramp. The entrance portico is good. The French drain is done. Like all of the other parts of the project are completed, but it was just this one first portion of the ramp. There's some issues with dimensions of the book drop pad and just the slope for ADA and stuff. So those things are going to be corrected. So I'll talk just real briefly. Maybe won't be brief. I'll talk a little bit about the collection development assessment pursuant to the Children's School and Library Protection Act. So I've received 17 requests for relocation of material submissions since my arrival in September. 15 have been completed. The 2 remaining will be completed by the end of the month. As indicated upon my arrival, the request for relocation of material submissions are not really the library's mechanism for addressing the Idaho legislation. It's actually a patron-generated mechanism. So regarding the library's professional duty to obey the law, I have begun the internal process as I did promise. So in conjunction with my collection development and technical services manager, there are 140 titles on route to my office for legal review. I am still working with my collection development and technical services manager on how best to provide transparency and efficiency regarding the items under legal review. And so by that, I mean, in the library world, we rely as heavily as we can upon our ILS, integrated library system, people call it the catalog, right? So we rely upon that. So right now the items are checked out on a legal review card. That's what a patron would see. They would see it out. I think there would be more transparency there without like the book is amending or a book is being repaired. Quite often that might be a location in the record. You'd see that's the location where it is. So I haven't worked out all that part of the process. That's something I'm getting with tech services. What's the best way to handle those materials while they're under review? So I'm just letting you know that because I've mentioned it before and people were concerned, right? That, what are we going to do about it? So the process has begun. 140 titles en route. Again, everything takes time. Sometimes it's there, it's out, and I gotta wait for it to be returned. It doesn't show up in my office. So I'm just trying to get started and get my was waiting to be in the office here and set it up in such a way where I can, go through this process. But again, I'm confident that the IRS is robust enough to be able to provide the transparency and, if anyone's inquiring or interested to know what those items are, there's nothing to hide. Sharing, see what we do. So, but people ask about the status, but again, the status will be followed just by the ILS indicating what the status is whenever that status changes. So, yeah. So I mean, I know there's a lot of controversy about this. I don't really feel it in the sense that this is just a fundamental library science issue. I mean, we have no such thing as a library. There's no such thing as librarianship without first cataloging classification. Cataloging classification is what makes a library what it is. So, which is going through a cataloging classification process. We catalog and classify every single day of the week based on content form. That's what we've been doing for centuries. So there's really nothing different here. I'm just trying to do things the way people have done them. So. And I probably can't stress that enough, but all that's happening here is the classification and cataloging of materials based on content and form in this case by form in a print or paperback, not paperback. So we catalog and classify all the time. That's our profession. So that's just what's happening in that regard. So I will say that there's going to be things to work out as far as how the process works, but sometimes I do receive submissions where it wasn't necessarily the patron, or their child or parent, or whatever, finding the item on the shelf, right? Which is kind of the purpose of the request for relocation material form. So now that the CLN has started its proper due process for this legislation, I'm gonna have, I respectfully insist that if I get a request for relocation of an item which is already under review, which would imply that they did that without finding it, but just an ILS search. Oh, this book is bad, does CLN have this book? They look and they see, oh, yeah, CLN has it, and then they lodge the request, but if I already have the item in under review in my office, then I just don't wanna have to trigger that 15-day process, right? So I really want, and especially if I might say, like, at the last meeting, when the decision was made about segregation versus integration, and now we're looking at the entire collection, which is fine. I do want to say, like, the 140 items that are en route to my office are all from the children's sector, they're all from the young adult, they're not very young adult, they're all from the collection for minors. I haven't gone into, and that's gonna be the priority, right? So I think the request for relocation of materials form needs to be understood as what the purpose of it is. It's when a parent or child comes across a book in the collection and wants that to be triggered into a request for relocation. And I understand why it might have been used in a different form before I started the process, but I'm just letting everyone know that the CLF is now engaged in doing its job of assessing the collection like libraries have always done. And so I'm just saying that I would like the request for relocation of material forms to be used. And then they're actually going to come in very handy when it comes to the adult collection, because now that we're letting children move freely through the adult collection, which is fine, they may come across things which wouldn't normally hit the radar, fine radar, right, of the collection development, right, that's focused on the minors collection. Yeah, you understand. So that's kind of where we're at. So, and again, a lot of this is going to come up in the policy we'll talk about later. And again, I just want to say it's going to take time, right? It's going to take time, but improving efficiency is part of this process for me. So getting a collection development manager who's specifically here for that one task, 3 or 4 tasks, right? Making a more robust collection development department is part of this process and will speed up the process. And then again, a lot more about that is coming up with the policy, but I just want to let everyone know where we're at. That is the end of my report.
Trustee Bloss?
Well, is this, the other libraries, Hayden, why is it so much lower for this year? Or is it really not year to date? I mean, 71,000 last year, 16,000.
No, sorry, that light brown, sorry. Okay, the light brown is population. So Hayden Circ is the light blue is last year, kind of purple is this year. So the difference is 75.3 versus 71.
Okay, I thought your population.
But the population is the brown.
Didn't look at that, okay.
So I mean, the idea here is that without writing any other notes in there, you kind of want to look at the gap between the brown and the circ to see how that gap plays out differently in different locations. I mean, you could do just a fraction kind of scenario, but yeah, so that's.
I got that wrong. The other question is, on these forms, 140 titles are in ground, 17 requests, I guess. Are these requests that parents, minors made? Or are these just the public? Because I think our policy was allowing the public to put in requests also. Is that true?
Well, I guess it's 2 questions. The one question, what were they? I mean, I'm speaking off the top of my head here. There were some, and that's kind of what I just referred to in my report. There were some that I could tell were kind of more along the lines of a known entity is searched in the catalog. The person knows we have it, and therefore that's the request. Versus the form itself would be, I'd have to go back and look at the form again more closely, but the idea of the form is that the item is found by the person on the shelf, right? And that was to trigger it. So there were some of those, I don't know the exact breakdown. There were a few examples of the other kind of form, the other kind of idea where it's a known entity search versus a browsing circumstance. I use those two types of terms, with kind of like unrelated terms. So it was a browsing experience, and they found, oh, this is shocking, this is terrible. And then they launched it. There were some of those for sure. And it just speaks to how the form is, like where they check the boxes of, you know, of who it is and stuff. But if it's an ILS search, right, against a review or something, then there were some of those. So, and that's fine. I just think that now, if the now that CLN is going to take care of its own collection, and it should, I'm not really sure that I need to worry about those kinds of form submissions. I mean, if anything, I would take it as an interesting value of the person being able to do the ILS searches and do that, but that's kind of what we're doing. That's our job to do, right? So I do really want the help of the public, you know, in good faith, right? If they do find something on the shelf, which is breaking the law, then by all means, trigger the form, right? But I'm trying to, and because I hadn't started it yet, I promised I would, and okay, now that I have, so in that interim period where I hadn't, it makes sense that the other use of the form, like the other interpretation of the form. So yeah, I hope that answers, I'm not answering the question about whether the form allows or doesn't allow that. I think that's a bit of a debate in the wording of the actual legislation. Because in the wording of the legislation, it doesn't specifically allow for it, but then there are points in the legislation where it just talks about a person, doesn't specify minor, parent of minor. So the legislation has a little bit of, I won't say leeway because I'm not a lawyer, but again, it's not even a concern of mine because from my perspective, it's a very straightforward process. But there will probably be people who would inquire as to how does the policy interpret the legislation's use of the term person in one part, but then parent with minor, parent with minor in another part. Same document. So anyway, this section.
Trustee Henning?
I have two different subjects really, but that one you're just speaking of now, the Children's School and Library Protection Act. That's the minimum. That's the bottom line. What do I call it? Minimal expectation of a law or demand of a law. Nothing says, in my opinion, whether the staff or the public discovers books are inappropriate in the minors area. There's no reason I would assume why you can't take action on those without having a form. That's just an opinion there. And I can go to a question if that's okay, still unrelated. Okay, my next question is, we had obviously 2 libraries reopen after a prolonged closure from ICE back in January last year. And my question is, what mitigation steps, whether they're physical or policy wise, have been implemented to avoid a repeat of these events in the future? Because it has gotten colder than it was last year in the past. It will get cold again someday in the future, even possibly colder than what we had. So, you know, we had a hose bib, for example, freeze and then it broke the wall. Maybe was there an inside valve shut off so that in case there's a cover on the outside gets knocked off or is not put in place? Or are there ceiling heaters or, I'm just kind of curious what actions, because we're not going to be insurable if it happens again. So I'm just concerned what mitigation efforts are in place actually, so we don't go through this again. So that's my question.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna let my facilities manager in February, went on the agenda for the board meeting, the facility manager gives a report to talk about all the great detail. All I know from him is that he did install, that's the right term, mechanisms up in the ceiling, in the ceiling, so that he has better control over knowing what the temperature is and being able to adjust things. Again, I don't know the full details, like whether it's a freestat type. I don't know what it is, but I know we did speak about it, and he has put things in place to improve his ability to be forewarned about the status. And I think also, if I remember correctly, insulation, greater insulation in areas that were susceptible. So he'll have all the details about what he actually put in place, but I do know, having spoken with him about it, that yes, we have taken measures to make sure it doesn't happen, or at least equip us to be better prepared to not let it happen again.
Good. Okay, and I had two hopefully quick questions. So I'm thinking it's May, it's floating around in my head, but when is the free gal subscription up? And the second question is, on the second page, it says that we have resources on our website that link to tutorials on spotting fake news. Wondering if those tutorials had been vetted for being neutral?
Sadly, I won't be able to answer either of those questions. I'll have to look into Freegal. I know what had been, which is running out the prescription, so I don't know, I actually don't know. But I will definitely get that to you. As far as the other one goes, I did see that, and that's kind of why I commented on. I don't have much to say about programs yet. I haven't had a chance to. Programming is a very significant part of library service, and it is something I want to really look at with the same, vision and that I spoke of in my directive and stuff. So, like I said at the very beginning, neutrality is a fundamental part of the profession, and I believe that will go to programming as well. It's not probably controversial what I just said. So the library profession is what it's always meant. So I mean, I will look into that specifically. The intention is to make sure that our professional integrity extends to every department.
We make it good because we're over time.
Just follow up on the request, I think, just for clarification, from what I recall, is we had to put in the question, are you the parent? Or are you the minor? But we specifically left out all these other questions about, are you a CLN district member and all this stuff. We want, my recollection is, we want the public to be able to let us know if the book has been found. But I think in answer to your comments, if you are reviewing 140 titles, you should be able to put that in the card catalog, and anybody online should be able to get their answer. It's under review, and you should be able to send a response to somebody that turns one in. It's under review, maybe just the date, I don't know. But I hope you're, feel free to do that.
Yeah, agreed. And again, like right now, because of the way we're talking to my tech services department, right now we're using a card to check out. So I think if you looked at it, it would be out. It would say out, right? Which isn't as transparent, which I agree with you. It would be better if it went to, like, if it was mending, or if the book had been spilled and it comes in, it doesn't go back in, it doesn't say in or available. It should say in mending, or, in repair, or let's say it's a brand new book. Oh, I can't wait to get this title. Is it available yet? The status would say in processing. So that's where we're not. I haven't got to the point where I've sat down with my tech services people and said, what can we call? What location should we give it? What can be called? That's where the transparency comes in. Patrons should be able to just see, location, legal review, or something like that. So they would know that that's where it is. And what the ILS can do with that, that's something that we can determine procedurally, right, within the library. So that's, yeah, I agree, though. It's transparency is definitely the objective.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, we'll move on to the Post Falls Library Report. She ready? Oh, there she is.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jennifer Kraft from the Post Falls Library, looking at my.
Tim, you didn't unplug or plug, did you? I don't know. Don't pull your shoulder out.
Let me try this. Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Let me try this. There we go.
There. Good.
Will it be helpful to have lights off or partial lights off? Does it
I can see it, but.
Either way.
Let me know.
Let's go see
Is
it.
that, yeah,
Yeah, that was better.
okay. All right. Well, welcome to the Post Falls Library Fiscal Year 2024 report. Thank you all for being here to listen. All right, so the beginning of fiscal year 24 started out normally, as always, with well-attended story times, craft programs, and popular book clubs. In September through December, we saw an average of 13,000 visitors a month and circulated over 30,000 items per month. We were fortunate, as you can see from the small pictures, to get some new stacking chairs for this room, new blinds, and a few comfy chairs with plugs. We didn't have a place for people to really charge devices before. We expanded our inspirational fiction section and created the new teen section. Teen collection, I apologize. Well, unfortunately, on January 14th, something pretty major happened. After days of temperatures -15, Post Falls Library was one of at least half a dozen businesses and schools in the area to experience catastrophic flooding due to sprinkler pipe failure and closed us to the public immediately. Actually, we hadn't even opened that day, so it happened about 2 minutes to opening. So while insurance coverage and repair schedules were being negotiated and determined, most of my staff worked temporarily at other libraries, but I did have a small team of me and 4 other people who stayed on site to work feverishly to delete over 7,000 items that were too damaged to recover. As you can see, the mold and moisture in that one stack of books. Imagine having to handle and delete 7,000 of those. In fact, it was pretty toxic to the point where I actually had one staff member who had to work in another location because she got sick. So anyway, it was kind of nasty work, but we did it. Then in March, my battery's running low. I wonder if that's part of it.
Arrow key on your
Okay,
computer.
yeah, I'll do that. Well, there we go. Oh, gosh, there we go. I apologize. Okay, so in March, we were notified that Compass Construction agreed to allow employees to set up a little boutique library in the undamaged portion of the library, which was actually this room. We had half of the room for the mini library, and then this half of the room for programs. So Post Falls staff got help from other district staff and volunteers to box up about 52,000 items while keeping about 4,000 to 5,000 items on site for the mini library. And I really want to put out special thanks to Casey Peters from Athol, who spearheaded the Herculean task of coordinating volunteers. It was quite the job, but she did it very patiently and with a lot of grace. So in March, we also held a 2-day book sale that attracted over 900 people and raised $5,800 in support of the library. Another special thanks to Karen Yoder and Marie Shockley for putting that event together. In April, on April 15th, actually, we opened our mini boutique library with a regular array of services like hold pickup, curbside service, computer use, a browsing library, and our used bookstore, Twice Sold Tales. Over the spring and early summer, we brought back our book clubs, Take and Make crafts, Second Harvest and PB&J Haydeners food distribution events, and our popular weekly yarn social. And in September, we were excited to bring back our weekly preschool storytime programs. We had an all ages fall harvest festival attended by over 50 people. That was a lot of fun. So despite the fact, key statistics, despite the fact that our mini library required dramatically reduced capacity, I was really pleased to see that the door count and physical number of items circulated was almost half of what it normally is. So our collection certainly was not half of what it normally is, but people were so pleased, the community was so happy that we were here in any capacity, that it was great to see that circulation was as high as it was. So that certainly confirms to us how important the library is to this community. In addition to my really hardworking team here at Post Falls, we had about 2 weeks once the construction was complete and we were allowed back into the damaged, now repaired part of the building. We had just over 2 weeks to unbox those 50,000 items. Here. Okay, well, it was a nice slide of people that I wanted to thank in addition to my really hardworking staff. When we saw that mountain of books that were not in any order, and realized we not only had to get them unboxed, but we had to put them back in order that we boxed them in. We thought we wouldn't make it, but we certainly did. And my team is just an amazing group of people. So I do want to thank our community supporters that helped with this. Of course, Compass Construction, Lake Coeur d'Alene Movers, Terramark, Kootenai County Fire and Rescue, River City Gardeners, Post Falls Police Department, the mayor, Boys and Girls Club, our Evening of Hope group, everyone that came out to give us support, including Birdie's Pies from up the street. Every once in a while, they would just bring us a box of pies. So people really supported us and we were really grateful for that. And so looking forward, we are, as of December 9th, we are looking forward to everything that's going to come with the future in our lovely new building, updating programs, getting children's services. We have been doing story times, but getting those back up and running. Attendance at those has already been increasing. So it's great to see people, lots of people back in the building and be able to not have 5 or 6 people crammed into a teeny tiny office. But anyway, we're glad to be back and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you and all of the staff have done through this very trying time. Trustee Blatz?
Sorry, wasn't able to make it to the grand opening, but can you kind of summarize what are the changes in the building? I know you got new carpet and you got the walls fixed.
Right, new carpet, walls
Was
fixed.
there a new layout or?
The layout is a bit different. I believe that Lindsay, Randy, and the architect designed the new layout. We have new furniture, which is really nice. A lot of the furniture, because it's wood, got saturated, so that had to be replaced. We reoriented the shelves in children's room, which we've been wanting to do for years anyway, so that there's really great sight lines into the room now, and the big window there brings in a lot of light. It just kind of rearranged where some of the collections were, but really the biggest change was the carpet and some new furniture. Yeah, it's very open in there now. The lighting was greatly improved as well. It's really bright and welcoming.
We're going to see it.
Yes. Are there any other questions or should we go on the tour? Okay, looks like we'll be going on the tour and we'll be back in here for, let's see, item number, wait, am I forgetting something?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, we'll be back for our trustee training at about 3:15. It's 3:15 and we are now ready for our trustee training by our legal counsel.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, you should have a packet to your right, or as close as I could get it. The first set of documents is the outline for today. It's 6 pages long. Next in your packet is going to be a case from Idaho, and then the third stapled case from Washington is just some homework for the next training session. If you have some time over the next month or so, give it a read. It relates to the way the en banc court in Washington has handled an issue that we're grappling with here, but sort of in the context of how they filter the internet access for their public libraries there. So I thought, since I missed last time because I was out sick, I would try and combine 2 topics so we could catch up, but have them be kind of related and have some synergy. And so today I chose to brief the board on the appropriate roles of the board, the director and staff, and then loop that framework into how a public employer should go about the process of disciplining or discharging the director and the employees for cause. So at the top, we have the board here, represents the district's highest governing body. It's comprised of the elected officials chosen by the constituent members in the district. It makes what I call, in quotes, major decisions. It's like steering the ship. The director runs the ship. He's the commander of the ship. The board would be, the vessel owner that says, I want the ship to go there. Sets overall strategy and policy. It has what we like to call one employee, the director, and the board can discipline or discharge the director for cause. And those are typically the only executive sessions that the director won't attend. The board can fix and pay employee salaries and compensation, classify those employees and adopt a classification policy that's implemented by the director, and then adopt personnel policies. The personnel policies are important because many states hold that the personnel policies in fact comprise an implied contract with the public employees. Although Idaho is an at-will state, the statute sets forth that the director can only be disciplined or discharged for cause. And interestingly, we'll see down below under the 332721 statute, it says the employees can be discharged or disciplined for cause, as necessary. And so I kind of leave the door open to wonder if that requires something more in Idaho. There's one citing reference, and for some of the new trustees, the reason why I put citing references related to statutes is generally because Idaho doesn't have very much case law, appellate case law. We have to pull from other states and try and guess how a court would handle it. This statute is referenced once in a case, Mendez versus Ada Community Library Board of Trustees, and it was out of a line of federal cases, and I've cited that there for you. It was in the appellee's answering brief, but I didn't find a case in Idaho sort of hitting any of these issues head on under this specific statute. So I've highlighted, you've probably read this many times, but I've highlighted some of the important sections of the powers and duties of the boards of trustees there. Establishing policies for the administration, operation, and use of the library or libraries under its control. And I want you to pay particular attention to the action word that's used. So there in 332720B, it says you can establish a policy. It doesn't say, implement the policy, right? Your task is to establish that policy that the director would then administer. Create job descriptions, personnel policies, and compensation packages for the library personnel. So then you would take, the director's recommendation and create those policies. He would then implement that. In E, you oversee the financial management of the library district. And you are also tasked under F to provide suitable rooms and structures and facilities. And this is tied into some of the cases we're going to cover next week in G about the reason we have rooms or facilities, or the reason we make collection decisions or purchase books and it's to fulfill the purpose of the library district, as it states in subsection G. You can establish policies for the purchase and distribution of those library materials. But again, this bifurcation of duties is your policy sets how the director implements that policy. So we still rely on the director to make collection development decisions based upon his professional judgment. And then you have a catch-all there in O, to exercise other powers not inconsistent with law necessary for the effective use and management of the library. We typically see that in a Dillon's rule state, and Dillon's rule means that the legislature has to specifically grant you that authority to do something. And so if you were going to take a strict read and you don't have that catch-all for the implied power, then the library district would be limited to just what's expressly stated. A court may give you that implied authority, but it's nice that you have a little catch-all provision here to implement these duties and powers that the legislature has granted on the library district. Of special note is subparagraph 2. Each board member should be mindful that when they're acting individually, they have no authority except as specifically authorized by the board. And so that's why we take great care whenever we're assigning an individual trustee to take action, we have that board motion state that in the motion. I'll use contracts, for example, but that has other requirements for signatures and things. But if we're going to have a board member do it, we'll say, we administratively authorize this individual trustee to act on behalf of the board. And so it's really the whole board acting, but for practical reasons, you're not going to have all 5 trustees doing it. And then each board member, each trustee has a duty to attend all the board meetings and all the committee meetings for which they've been assigned. We're going to move on to the director now, and you'll see that in this second statute, there are still additional board powers granted in the statute, but they're bifurcated. So the director advises the board, implements your policies, acquires the library materials, equipment, and supplies, and administers the district as a whole. The director is in charge of operational day-to-day decisions. The director hires and oversees the hiring of all other employees other than the director based upon the policy created by the board. The director is tasked with exercising his professional judgment as a librarian and an expert in his field. He serves as secretary for the board without voting rights, disciplines and discharges any employee of the district for cause as necessary. And this comes out of 332721 and case law. I've highlighted some important provisions here about how you appoint the director. He administers the district, he advises you and implements the policies, attends all executive sessions except for the ones where maybe something related to the directors being considered. Go to paragraph 2 and you'll see that the library board can discipline or discharge the director for cause. And then the second sentence says that the library director can discipline or discharge any employee for cause as necessary according to the written policies of the board. And so the policies that the board sets related to its employees are critical because it guides and constrains both the director and the employees. And although it may not constitute a contract because the policy states that it is not a contract, it's kind of the rules of the road that sets the expectations. And so when a court comes back and looks at what is for cause or what is for cause as necessary, they're going to be taking this policy and our custom into account to determine if what the Lunenburg court in 2018 adopted as the middle ground approach. And essentially what this case out of California, the Idaho Supreme Court adopted, says is that the court has a duty to require that this good cause or adequate cause or good cause is necessary is rooted in an objectively reasonable basis for the termination and based on facts supported by substantial evidence. So they'll weigh testimony and say, is the director's story credible? Is the employee's story credible? Who do I believe? And then they're not going to look at what you actually thought at the time. They're gonna not take a subjective approach. They're going to take an objective one and say, is this objectively reasonable? right? Almost irregardless of what you thought, but it's a separate standard that the court will take a look at the facts fresh and determine for itself whether or not your action was reasonable. The Cotran Court out of California that the Idaho Supreme Court adopted, their analysis essentially took a balanced regard for the employee's interest in continuing employment and with the employer's interest in efficient personnel decisions. And so that's where this objectively reasonable standard comes from. Moving on to page 4, the Leeds versus State ex rel. The Department of Family Services in Wyoming was a case that was handled by the Wyoming Supreme Court fairly soon after the Idaho Supreme Court took up this issue. Wyoming thought the approach was solid. They adopted the approach and they quoted the Idaho Supreme Court case in adopting the Cotran middle ground approach from California. That was a public context, public employment context. And the reason I put that in there is because Lunenburg was not. Lunenburg just set the standard for what for cause is. The Leeds case in Wyoming was in a public employment context. It shows that the state is adopting the same standard. Washington states that their just cause is neglect of duty, negligence, incompetency or inefficiency, dishonesty, intoxication, disobedience of the employer's rules, instructions, or orders, insolence or disrespect, violation of the unlawful discrimination policy or retaliation policy, unfaithfulness to the employer's interests, or incompetence, immoral, disrespectful, or unbecoming conduct. Some of those terms are terms of art, and some can be construed and interpreted in a broad manner. And so I'm not trying to get too far in the weeds on each one of those, just to give you a flavor for what courts recognize as a just cause in another state. There's a checklist for discharge here that will probably be more helpful for the director, but this kind of walks you through certain recommendations that I might make to an HR director or a director or a manager of an employee to put you in the correct thought process on how we move through the discipline or the discharge process, especially when we have graduated disciplinary procedures, right? When it's not this sort of at will, no fault context where you can just fire them for the color of the shirt they're wearing. We take a graduated sort of disciplinary process. So what's the reason? That will be articulated in litigation. It should be the actual reason the employee is terminated, right? Don't make up one reason when you get to court because you're embarrassed about the real reason. The court will look at that. Is it consistent with the handbook policies or other standards or your process for termination? Is the rule of the employee violated? Is it reasonable? Is that why the employee was terminated? Was the employee given notice of the handbook or the rules they were supposed to follow? Should there have been some final warning or other less intense form of discipline prior to termination? Did you do a reasonable inquiry or investigation to determine that the rule was in fact violated? And the Community Library Network does have almost a mandatory investigation process if there is a violation of policy. And so the director will follow that process, and it's set forth in our procedures and our policies. Does the decision maker have the appropriate authority to make the decision? How much seniority does the employee have, and what's the overall work record and their past performance evaluations? Are there mitigating factors? Is there a probationary or warning period? Would a transfer, job change, or medical or personal leave of absence alleviate the problem? Have similar situations been handled in the past that you're deviating from? Is it clear it's not based on an illegal discriminatory motive or retaliation because of the employee having a whistleblower status? And then what we talk about as a gut check or the smell test, think about what a jury would think if they were presented with these facts. Montana has a good cause articulated, and it ties in a similar set of facts or standards. Legitimate business reason shouldn't be whimsical, arbitrary, false, or capricious, and have some logical relationship to the needs of the business, and it's not good cause if it's a pretext and not the honest reason for the discharge. The last component here today is the homework for the next trustee training. And I provided for you the Bradburn case out of Washington. And this is en banc. And what en banc means is like the entire court, like all of the justices are going to participate in that. So for example, like in the Ninth Circuit, typically you'll have 3 judges that will handle a case. When they do en banc, they can have 10 or more, or the whole circuit. You know, there's graduated ways they handle that. So when we see an opinion that says en banc, it just carries a little bit more weight because you've got like this unanimous participating court that's making a statement of law. And this will be a very good primer for us to be considering as we debate and potentially implement a new policy related to the materials harmful to minors, because this will show you where the Washington court is going and how it adopts similar standards even out of an internet context to kind of give you an indication of where the courts are going to go in the future. I think it'll be very helpful as you think through how to craft the language of your current policy. And that concludes my training for December. Are there any questions?
Trustee Glass?
Go back on page 2. Notes I made in the middle. Individual number 2, individual trustees have no authority to make decisions, blah, 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 specifically unless specifically authorized by the board. So in the past, we've done, I'm the clerk of the board and have done a press release. How is that supposed to be done by one board member? Is the press release, I mean, I think we've tried it a couple ways. Is the press release supposed to be asked for by the board? Or is the press release approved by the board? Or how does the clerk act on behalf of the board? What's the right way?
Well, 2 issues here. One, there's already authorization granted by the board when it adopts the bylaws and determines who the clerk of the board through the statute as well. And so that specific authorization from another area of law. So you'd be under O, exercising other powers not inconsistent with law. But then what I would recommend is that the board adopt a policy as it relates to issuing press releases, and that would grant authority. So the policy could state, we want the clerk to draft it and come back for review. Obviously, you'd want to comply with open meetings laws as a part of that process. But what 2 speaks to is, you know, I don't have one board member making a policy decision for the district, right? It would require at least a majority vote of the entire board. Any other questions? Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, now we're supposed to go on a break, even though we kind of already have. You guys want to skip it?
Skip the break?
Anyone need break?
I move that we do. We skip. I say skip it.
Okay. All right, well, it looks like there's a consensus to go ahead and skip the break. So we will move on to number 11, policy discussion, internet use policy.
My first one is just probably a very easy question. There's a blue underscore near the bottom portion, Idaho Code and Child Internet Protection Act. Is that just to indicate there's a hyperlink in the actual policy when it's finished?
Yes, yeah, although anytime it's underlined blue is a hyperlink, and
Okay.
I put a link to the 5, some of them are, so. But yeah, from the PDF.
Okay,
Another comment.
go ahead, trustee Hammack.
Depending upon how we're going to go through this, I don't have any issues with the edits that were proposed in here. So unless you're gonna go through it in a different fashion. I don't know how you want to approach it, but I'm happy with it.
Okay, normally by seriatim, there's not that many changes in here, so I think we can go through it by page. So is there any, I have a comment, but does anyone else have comments or questions on page 1? Okay, under prohibited activities, number 5, the last half of the sentence, especially in matters of race, creed, color, national origin, gender, disability, or sexual orientation. I believe all those categories are deserving of protection, but it kind of feels like Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal. I don't think that other categories are, or people are less worthy of protection from harassment or bullying. So what do you guys think?
So,
Trustee Hanley?
so I'm reading it, I'll just read the rest of that sentence. And harassment or bullying of staff or members of the public, meaning coming under example that was prohibited. So we just, are you proposing we just put, that's the end of the sentence and skip the especially on down?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Let's make sure.
Yes, thank you. Trustee Ploss?
I think where those, especially list comes from race, creed, color, national origin, gender, disability, sexual orientation. I don't think it's a complete list, but I think these are the protected classes by the US Supreme Court. So I think there's a matter, or age is something that's probably missing. I'm not sure what, if I have them all memorized, but I think these are there because of the Supreme Court has said these are the things you can't touch. So I don't know whether we want to remove it just because these are a special case.
Okay, Trustee Hanley?
That might be correct for equal opportunity and other reasons, but this simply states that it's a prohibited activity, and this is some examples, it's not limited to this, but harassment or bullying of staff or members of the public. Period. I would think that would be sufficient. We're not talking about hiring, firing, or any other thing, so I'll just say I'm not opposed to deleting the rest of that sentence.
Okay, yeah, I just was thinking, if someone's an atheist, they shouldn't be harassed or bullied. Or if they're religious, they shouldn't be harassed or bullied. If they're 90 years old, they shouldn't be harassed or bullied. I mean, there's no call for harassing or bullying anyone. So, do we have any kind of, director, is there an opinion on removing that?
Having just went through the tutorial on legal side, board just sets the policies. I mean, I understand both sides of what's being discussed here. I mean, I leave it there because it was there and no reason. I don't see any harm either way to leave it there. So I agree with trustee Foss to a certain degree that if these are special cases that have been outlined at the Supreme Court level, then there's no harm in having it there. The most important line in this sentence will be that at the very top example, because it's all basically a continuation with semicolons. Examples of library net use prohibited include but are not limited to. So yeah, to me, it's not a deal breaker either way. And when I looked at, originally I thought this policy required more attention, but when I looked at it, assistant director and the technical department looked at it, there really isn't that much that we had to change. So that's why, yeah, it's a pretty light.
Okay, Trustee Ambrosetti.
I understand what trustee Ploss is saying. I'm very familiar with the protected classes, but I think this is verbose and public can be the end of the sentence.
Okay, so then it sounds like we have consensus of, or majority consensus of at least 3 who would like to remove the rest of the sentence, so it would just have a period after the word, or after of the public period.
Semicolon.
Uh, oh, you're right, right. Okay, yes, not a period, a semicolon. Thank you. Okay, was there anything else on page 1? None, we'll move on to page 2. I don't think I have a problem with anything on page 2. Anyone else?
Nothing.
Okay, hearing no objections, we will move on to page 3. Is there anything on that page? Any questions, comments, changes, trustee Claus?
Not sure where to put it, but the time limits is one of the things I wanted. And maybe it could just be added in here, but I think CLN should keep track of access time. So somebody logs in, I think right now we have metrics that just record how many times somebody connects to the internet. But we're going to be putting time limits on watching the time, but I would like to add a sentence of CLN will record the time duration of the internet connection. I think the reason I'm saying that is I would like to know how much our internet's being used, not just how many times somebody connects to it.
Director?
Before we put it in there, I have to verify with the IT department, that's a possibility. I see that more as procedural. It's a statistic that if it was requested, we would strive to get that statistic. I hesitate to comment on whether it should or shouldn't be put in right now, because I'd have to consult with my IT about whether or not they can actually track that. I'm assuming they can. I mean, even on our stats, we have, usage website. The question is, or do we computer? So computer and internet use is a stat there.
It's number of connections.
So we need to drill down and see. So I kind of try and want to draw the lines between like policy versus procedure. If I'm being asked to produce a statistic, then I'm going to turn to my IT guy and say, hey, we want to drill down and get the statistic on total computer usage at the terminal and the building, and then get even more specific. What is it people solve? What is it paid? Right. I see that as procedural, whether it needs to be in that paragraph. I guess that's okay, but I can't say yes, put it in, because I can't actually guarantee that we have that ability to track that stat.
Trustee Yannick?
When I read this small paragraph, I saw that as fairness for access, meaning somebody can't hog the internet. I didn't see that as a way of measuring utility usage. So I read that as, again, access, when you're saying there's time limits and the person has an hour, whatever, I'm assuming it just means that somebody can't hog the computer for the 8 hours of the day. So I didn't see this as a utility issue.
Trustee Claus?
Well, I'm not disagreeing that people shouldn't have unlimited use. I don't think if we're connected with fiber, I don't think it's gonna slow it down for other people, but I think users should know that we're keeping track of how long it's being used, and I think it should come from the board as a policy that the board would like this or expects this to be tracked. I agree, maybe don't know what the capabilities are, but I'm guaranteeing in there that there's a clock running on it. So, but I think it should be in the policy, because it should be an expectation that the board is setting.
I think that there's a timer that comes up that tells you how much time you have left of your hour. Not sure that I really see the total time as useful. Does anyone else?
I agree.
Yeah, Trustee Blass?
Well, it's useful because Just saying how many times somebody connects is really almost a worthless metric. How much the internet is being used is very indicative of what we're doing. Or what are we providing, how good of a, how much demand is there for our internet product? It's a much more useful metric that we should be looking at, instead of just how many times it's connected. So I'm not looking for the timer to tell you how long you have left. I'm just looking for every month, how many hours of internet were we connected to by patrons?
Yeah, so the only thing I'd mention is that, I mean, if every session is an hour and we gave a stat that said there were X number of sessions, it's just multiple, like times an hour. The only thing we wouldn't know is if someone didn't use the full hour, right? So how many sessions were terminated earlier than an hour? So if we're just looking for the number of uses, that's fine. My experience, that's all you're gonna get. You're not gonna get it's not gonna have the report that I get from IT is not gonna have anything but numbers there. It's not gonna say Joe Smith used it. It's just gonna be like, even if it didn't went in blue barcode numbers, it would just be this terminal, this time, right, this duration. So I'm willing to give you any statistic you like. In this case, when I look at this speaks to Trustee Hanley. This is really about creating district-wide sort of equality, fairness as far as, usage of the material. But if we just look for a number, like, it's really only the sessions that didn't go the hour. That's where you just pull the difference of what full time is. So again, I'm totally willing to get all the stats that we can drill down to. I kind of think it's procedural. But yeah, I'm open to anything.
Okay, well, it didn't sound like we had a consensus. That would be more than two people, it would be three. So are there any other changes or questions to that page? Oh, okay, hearing none, you're moving on to the next page. I like the changes better on that page. Trustee Hanley?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, actually, Trustee Amber said, I think you've had less
Yes,
this time.
let's say we're talking.
Supervision and monitoring. On page, on the next page. I was thinking as I was listening to this discussion of bandwidth and time, really, there is, I believe, and Trustee Ploss can correct me because he used to be an internet provider, but I believe that there is a bottleneck at the routers for the Wi-Fi, that it does not provide that fast. Wi-Fi is not as fast as the direct fiber optic connectivity. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I'm pretty sure that the Wi-Fi is strong enough. I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that people can sit in their cars and tap into our Wi-Fi here. Which brings up getting around the filtering software and supervision. I don't know that there's anything that can be done about that. But first of all, even if they don't, and I don't know that a lot of people do that, but even if they don't access something that's salacious, I think that the most significant thing to remember is, as I said, it is there's a bottleneck there, and the bandwidth cuts down. And so if we have people out in the parking lot and we have people in here, the bandwidth is necessarily, and the speed is necessarily going to decrease. I'm not sure, I'm just presenting this as an issue. I'm not sure if we've given that any thought or not about Wi-Fi being accessible outside the confines of the library or any of our libraries.
Yeah, like I'll have to discuss it with my IT department. I would guess that it's not necessarily the same network. The hardwired at the Ethernet versus the wire. I mean, in places I've been before, that it wasn't always, one would have been behind the firewall, one might not have been. Right, so I don't know what the status is of and whether it's the same at every branch. what the status is of the Wi-Fi that public can reach in the parking lot versus what's actually at the terminal. So I can report back on that, but these are good questions that I'll bring to IT and come back to it.
Trustee Claus?
So just for clarification, the filtering software is always on the Wi-Fi. So if some adult is logging in, he's getting filtered. It's only talking about it can be disabled in the case of minors. Or this is unclear.
Yeah, the way,
Whether you're trying to keep track, or somehow or another, are we trying to keep track of the person that's logging in if they're not a minor or they are a minor?
the way, yeah, no, it's the way the way I was reading that section is that this is the case where at a terminal in the building, it originally said a staff could disable it for the person doing bona fide research at that station. This wasn't really referring to the public Wi-Fi access that can be accessed outside the building. If it is, I'm not confirming, but if that's the case is that the filtering software is applied to the Wi-Fi, then it wouldn't be that first sentence talking about library supervisor oversight. It would be more to the IT manager in collaboration with the administrative team to say, hey, let's make an adjustment to the public Wi-Fi, right? Because the first sentence is about a specific case of a bona fide person doing research, which couldn't apply to generic Wi-Fi usage, because we wouldn't know whether the guy's doing research in the parking lot. So the first sentence is speaking more like on-site at a terminal, supervising and monitoring like terminal computers versus the Wi-Fi. But the second sentence is about, and the reason we made the changes was so that it's actually goes to the IT manager and the administrative team to make decisions about filtering beyond what a supervisor can do at the terminal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're over time for this, so do you have something quick?
Well, I think this needs work. We need to specify that we want filtering on the Wi-Fi. I don't know whether this Wi-Fi is, I don't know how it's worked with, but does a minor have to enter his library card to get onto it as part of the password? So then they would know he's a minor, but if he uses an adult, he doesn't have the filtering. And we need to make sure minors have filtered Wi-Fi. And I don't see that in here.
Yes, my feeling is that this is referring to in-house terminals and not to Wi-Fi. I'm assuming it's public Wi-Fi. When I enter the building, I'm going to the staff Wi-Fi. If I know when they walk in the building and their phones automatically pick up Wi-Fi, assuming it's an open network that doesn't require a login. I mean, if you were in the parking lot, you swung by and you caught the public Wi-Fi, I think you might do a Starbucks or something like. That's not what this is referring to. At a terminal in the building, which has the filtering software on it, and that's what's being disabled at that moment in time. The only changes being made in the policy here is that it's not just not just a staff doing it, but it's the library supervisor. The buck is stopping at the library supervisor, the branch manager kind of thing, versus the staff person who just happens to be helping the person at the terminal. So
But you need a password to get on the Wi-Fi here.
Sure.
she's giving us real time.
I just tried and no, it's automatic. You don't need a password. It just logs you in,
Is it filtered?
not secured, connected.
No, does it have filtering? Can you get to what, Pornhub or something? I don't know.
The only thing that is securely password protected is post-fault library staff.
No, I don't mean the password.
And I do
mean,
not see.
Can you, if you're logged on, can you get?
Oh, you mean from the
pornographic
browser?
site right now? Because that needs to get in this policy if it isn't.
If you really want to have that associated with your phone.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to postpone approving this or sending it to the attorney for legal
The answer
review
is
until
no.
next month?
Know what?
It does not require, you can just go to any site.
Do you guys want to put a hold on it? Okay, all right, so then we will move on to the next one.
I just,
Oh,
just so
yeah,
that when we come back to it and get through the process, the thing I'm tasked with is to clarify and then verify that we're going to attempt to filter the public Wi-Fi. That's, okay, I just want to make sure I know my actions. Because that just was referring to in-house stuff, but we want, the trustees are asking me to go back to my IT, figure out whether, well, you kind of already know the answer whether we do, so you want me to know whether we figure out if we can apply the filter that we apply to in-house tech to the public Wi-Fi.
And also, you can ask, why is it not password protected? Why don't people have to use their CLN library card or something? Why do we make it available to the public? If you're a CLN, if you got a card, you can use your card as a password. But I don't understand why we're letting everybody connect to it.
yeah, I think that probably came in handy in 2020 when people weren't coming in, but as far as being out in the parking lot. All right, so we are moving on to the policy packet discussion. 7. So many of these policies been recently beaten nearly to death. So I think, well, not all of us, I guess, trustee Ambersetti, but we recently reviewed most of this. I think that we can get through it doing the seriatim page by page to get through it in a reasonable amount of time. And we would not be sending any of them for legal review until we've gone through all of them. So we will go in order, starting with the children in the library. Actually, there's quite a bit of changes on that one, so maybe this one we will go through by section. Does anyone have any on the first paragraph there, trustee Hanley?
The first paragraph, let me see if I can read it. Okay, to read halfway through it in black text. Everyone regardless of age has full access to the general library collections and filtered internet. When I'm reading the card policy farther down here, a parent can restrict somewhat access. So I would like to maybe propose changing the, everyone regardless of age may have full access to the general library collections. Because if the minor is not given full access, then everyone doesn't have full access. So it's a small change, but I think that would be more telling as to this is how it interacts with the another policy we have here in our collection.
Makes sense to me. Right, so do we have consensus on that? Anyone else? We need 3 people for,
Right here.
so it'd just be everyone regardless of age may have full access. Trustee Hanley?
As long as no one else, in the first paragraph, I have another one.
Oh, okay, well,
Unless someone else
why don't
has.
we resolve that one
Oh, I'm
first?
sorry, I thought you finished it, sorry.
Well, I mean, we would need consensus, which would mean
Okay.
that we would need one more person to
That's
say yes, therefore that change. So, okay, so trustee Ambersetti is the 3rd person, so we do have consensus on changing that to may have full access. Okay, and trustee Hanley, you have a change?
Oh, the sentence in front of that in green, it reads in accordance with the Children's School and Library Protection Act, the community library maintains a special collection of mature content which is inaccessible to minors. I think we could continue that sentence to say, unless accompanied by the minor's parent or legal guardian at all times, because that area, that material is not necessarily, I think there's a requirement that if the parent wants to have the child there and the parent's there, they can go there. So I think we should allow it by adding in unless accompanied by the minor's parent or legal guardian, and I put at all times, because you can't dump them there and walk away.
Trustee Claus?
I'm strongly opposed to that. This part about the parent, if you go look at the 17 or 15, 17B, that is a legal or anyway, we can't be prosecuted if the parent is there with him and we get a paper that's signed saying that they're the parent. I don't think we need to go advertise to the public that we're allowing parents to come in and do this. Why do we need to say it? If they are there and this goes to court, you get out of jail. You can't be prosecuted. That's all the law says. It doesn't say you have to allow them. There's nothing in the law saying you have to allow parents to accompany them, and I don't think we should be stating that at all.
I would be interested if the director had an opinion on that.
Well, I mean, it comes up in the rules of conduct. I don't mean to jump ahead, but the wording in the rules of conduct, minors accessing the mature content collection without parental or legal guardian accompanying it, that comes under a prohibited action. So, Trustee Hanley is correct in saying that. I mean, to add it there, it's just being like with his previous point, it's just making it more consistent with other parts of the packet. So, it's already being said.
Okay.
And so I'm not saying either way. To me, it's just a question of we can add it there because it actually does already exist in the rules of conduct. We don't have to add it there because it already exists in the rules of conduct. So I could go either way on it because the principle of it is something that needs to be agreed on. That yes, we are allowing that. I think we have to allow that. I guess so that's where the lawyer would step in and say you have to, you don't have to, but it is already in the rules of conduct.
Okay, Trustee Ambrossetti.
I don't like it in the rules of conduct any more than I like it in here. And the reason is that, like Trustee Plus, I mean, this is kind of the bare minimum here. And it's also talking about civil liability in subparagraph 6A. And nowhere do I see anything that, well, I guess the bottom line I'm making there is that we shouldn't be making accessible any of the material that is being prohibited in this law, just because a parent or guardian says, oh yeah, they can look at that stuff. I think it's a bad idea. And I think it gives sends a bad signal. And there's nothing that says we have to do that.
Okay, if it's unnecessary, we're just leaving it as is. Trustee Hanley?
I was gonna say I'm flexible on it, but when we get to the other policy, I think there are some kind of parental right statutes of sorts that parents can't take a kid into there, a minor. So I'm not promoting putting it in. It was a suggestion. I don't really care if it's in there or not. Just threw it in there as an observation. It may belong in, may not. So I'm happy to abstain or support whatever way the board wants to go on this one.
Okay, so Trustee Claus?
I put it up here on the screen. So the new law 6 says it shall be an affirmative defense to civil liability under this section that the defendant, meaning the library, if we're prosecuted or taken legal action against. B, we verified the minor was accompanied at the time of the act by his parent or legal guardian or by another adult, and the adult represented that he was the minor's parent or legal guardian, and signed a written statement to that effect. Our librarians should go over and get a signed statement if there's somebody there. But this is just, they can't take legal action against us if we do this. I am completely opposed to saying it in any policy, whether it's the other policy or this one. But we don't have to do it, or we don't have to make that clear. It's just, we can't be prosecuted. It's an affirmative defense. That's the word I was looking at for.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like we have consensus on that. Shall we move on? Is there anything else in that first paragraph? Okay, hearing none. Trustee Bloss?
I was just gonna ask the director on this terminology, the library does not act in local parentis. Why is the library as a public institution any different than the city hall or any public building, in Idaho or Post Falls? If children walk in, I don't think any public institution has a policy saying that children actually don't have a right to be in here except for parents. Is that really legal? Can we say children don't have a right to be in here because it's a public institution any more than they don't have a right to be walk into the city hall? I don't know where that comes from. And I'm just a little bit queasy that you do have to let children come in.
Director?
I don't think that's what that's saying. It just says the community library network does not act in local parentis. Parents and legal guardians are responsible for the minor child's access to the community library network buildings and personal safety and behavior therein. And that just ties into the unattended children part of the book that comes down lower, right? So a child under the age of 9, I'm not saying whether it's legal or illegal. It's in our policies. It's a inappropriate use. It doesn't come under the illegal section of that, but it comes under the inappropriate use of library privileges or property. Minors under the age of 9 accessing the library without a parent, legal guardian, or caregiver. So it's really just the unattended children's policy. You could have one of those on your own, but basically the children in the library. So we're just saying that if you're under a certain age, you are not allowed to be unattended in our buildings. If that's illegal for us to say, then I wouldn't be saying it. I'm not going to break any laws. But typically libraries will have unattended children's policies saying, if you're under a certain age, and we debated this last time, whether that should be 9 or 14, whatever, 9 or 12, right? But that just speaks to the first point of this policy, which is supervision of children in the library. We set the unattended child age under the age of 9, and that's if a child that was 5 years old, ostensibly you see it visibly looks 5 years old, coming in unattended, then we turn to our policy and say, wait a minute, you shouldn't be in here unattended. I'm not saying it's illegal for you to be in here, otherwise I would have put it under the illegal section. Which is why under the illegal section, I put 10, which is really the debate as to whether we can or cannot stop minors from accessing the mature content collection if a parent is with them. Which is different than the argument about, well, should we say it? Should we promote it? Should we have? But part of the rules of conduct is that you have to obey library signage. So somewhere we're going to on the door or whatever, frosted in some nice font, it's going to say 18 years and up. It could say 18 years and up and that's it. Or it could say 18 years and up, or accompanied by your parent. So what we say is different than what these policies are. Policies are policies, and then there's procedural stuff that will surround, the room or the shelving or whatever. So, I'm obviously to defer to legal counsel when it comes to whether I'm breaking the law, or that's why this stuff will go to legal review. But in this case, I'm just saying that it isn't our responsibility to supervise children under a certain age. We're allowing children over a certain age to be there, and we will let them be there, and they don't have to be supervised. That would be 10 to 17. And that's all that this is saying. And it's a you could you could change the title and call it the unattended children's policy. It's essentially children in the library.
Okay, anything else for, trustee Bloss?
I guess maybe it's a question for legal, or he can think about it later, but I'm just, do we have the right of the CLN to say that, we don't allow children to come in, just like City Hall? Do they, I don't think they say anything, but does every public entity have the right to make a policy saying we don't allow unattended children under 9? Or is that?
Are we getting further research on that?
Yeah.
But, I mean, think about what a court does. You got a crying baby, he tells you you gotta take your baby out in the hall. Do I think it's constitutional or whatever? Follow the statute? Doesn't really matter. What are you gonna do? Appeal it? But the board meeting has a standard of disruption. And so the public is entitled to be here and participate unless they disrupt the meeting. And so that pulls your discretion back to, having control over a space, right? And so that is going to apply to the library. It's a different function, it's a different use. And so the way the court's going to analyze who is there and how are they lawfully and legally there based upon that use. And so I think that the library has developed this age because of its historical experience. The librarians have said the younger the children are, the more likely they are need to be supervised. And it's a different word than accompany, because accompaniment requires almost you to be within an arm's length. Supervision is to oversee or to be in charge of. So supervising something doesn't necessarily mean line of sight. And so it still gives the parents discretion on what is appropriate for supervision, but it also sets a policy that, look, the library is trying to protect all of its patrons' quiet enjoyment of the space. And we've said that the young crying children can't be consoled by Director Walters. So we need the parent to be there to do it, right? So it's not like you're having them accompanied at all times, but they're supervised while they're here. And so I think it's a reasonable approach to protect each patron's use of the library. Could you say no 9-year-old can come into the library? No, that's extreme, you couldn't. But could you say that every minor must be accompanied by a parent? That probably would deviate from custom as well. And so there's common sense and there's what's legal. And so we're in a really sort of common sense historical custom area for operations of libraries. And I mean, I don't think there's a nonprofit organization out there, you know, representing 8 to 9-year-olds who want to be free from parental supervision, right? And we're already saying we're not in loco parentis, so we're already assuming that you're there by permission. So we don't step in until there's a problem. So we're not policing the doors and checking IDs and figuring out what kids. We're going to say, oh, here's a loud child, give them a warning. If it persists, now we're going, where's the parent? The librarian can't take the parent, so we have to call law enforcement. So we don't want to have to call law enforcement and get CPS involved. We're just going to say, hey, parents, look, supervise your kid while you're here because we can't take them anywhere. All we can do is call the cops, right? So I think it's reasonable. If you want me to dig into it more, I'm happy to do it. What age it is can vary, but this is really just a procedural sort of operational thing based upon, you know.
All right, if there is no further comment, we'll move on to the next.
I prefer
Oh.
it not, no. Prefer if we don't spend the money to further pursue it with legal.
Sorry, what?
I recommend we do not ask council to further pursue it.
Oh.
Unless somebody objects, I don't.
Okay, yeah, I don't.
I don't want to
Anyone
spend the
else
money
see
on
the
it.
need?
I thought it was resolved. So.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well then resolved, and we are moving on to the next section. That first sentence there, parents, legal guardians and caregivers, please note the following library policy. Is that fine with everybody?
Yep.
Right here, parents, legal guardian, so just the first sentence under that first paragraph. Everyone good with that?
Yes.
Okay, we have consensus on that. Moving on to number 1. Does anyone have any changes they want to make there?
No.
I'm good with it. There is no objection. We're moving on to the number two. So replacing, well, anyway, so number two, there's two of them. There's the one that's crossed out and then there's the replacement one. So we will discuss that. Does anyone have any issues with that?
No,
Trustee Bloss?
So till we get this resolved, I don't like C because I don't think we've resolved what mature content collection is. Do we have a policy defining it? Well, I go ahead with number two. Until we deal with the mature content collection or adult access only. And a policy or not a policy was defined as, I'm not just gonna brush it off and just say, it's okay to say that. I want something behind it.
Okay, so that is one trustee that has an issue with 2C. Does anyone else?
no. I'm good with it.
Okay, well, I'm also good with it, so I think, well, we don't have consensus on that. Is there any other issues with 2A, B, or C? Director?
I just want to say, so based on last month's meeting, we kind of, in my mind, we have resolved a significant question, right? So this is just simply saying if a child attempts to access the mature content collection, the conduct will be triggered, right? So the mature content collection has been decided by the trustees last meeting. It's going to be a segregated location. To me, it's procedural, whether that's a room, whether it's a bunch of shelves, right? And we can certainly talk about that. I'm willing to advise on that. But there really isn't, in my mind, there isn't any, it's not vague or there's nothing missing there. This is simply saying that a child in the library who attempts to access the mature content collection, which we've already agreed is a segregated entity, it will trigger the rules of conduct. So everything surrounding our decisions about what the mature content collection, not what it is, that's different, where it is doesn't need to be in this policy, because it's not, this policy is not about that. This policy is just simply saying, if they access it, right, if they attempt, in other words, they're skirting library signage, they're skirting being supervised or accompanied, like they're breaking the rules regarding their presence in the library in regards to the mature content collection. That's all it's saying. It's not here to make, it's not this policy's place to make any definitions about the mature content collection location. That can all be fleshed out. It wouldn't be in here anywhere, in my opinion.
Trustee Bloss?
So the director left out the policy defining the adult access only. The name was changed content collection, mature content collection. But without my policy being considered that I started in August, there's no meat behind this. So I am holding back until we decide. I think the board should define it. There should be a policy saying what it is, what goes in it, how it's operated. And until we have that, this is just, window dressing, so.
Okay. Trustee Ambrossetti?
I'm fine with the way this is worded. I have no concern except for the actual nomenclature. I'd like it to be standardized. Adults only, adults only area is how we have it worded in other parts. So I just would like it to be standardized, but I think we can come to agreement on this whole thing and so that we can get this approved. I think we can come to agreement on the idea of parents and making the types of material we're trying to protect children from, parents giving them that access. It's a simple matter of all of us being, or at least the majority of us agreeing that that shouldn't happen inside the library, that if they want to provide those kinds of materials to their children, it's not something that we want to have happen. We don't want a parent to be accompanied by a minor to go into an adult access only area. And everyone can see it, it's visible. But to have them go in there and to hand over, something with salacious material. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be Lady Chatterley's Lover. It could be, The Joy of Sex. I don't know if we have The Joy of Sex, but the point is, I think we can come to agreement on this and get this knocked out. Because, I want to get it knocked out. I think we need to get it knocked out. Just change the name and all of us agree that we're not going to allow, parents to hand over material in the library or on the library, inside the confines of the library. That's all.
Okay, actually, I didn't like the mature content collection, the nomenclature, because makes it sound like it's something to aspire to, where these are books that have been determined by the legislature to be harmful. So I would be in agreement to change that to, wherever it says mature content, to change it to adult access only. So we've got two. Do we have one more on that? For consensus? Oh, Director?
I just want to just say two things. One, to refer, like, trustee possible to meet, the meat of, I obviously respect the adult access only draft you made. For me, there are, I see procedural things, I see some policy things, and I've spread out the meat into my packet. Like, but in my packet, I talk about, I even added additional one from the last time where I added it into the collection policy, right? There's, if you ask, like, what is it, where is it, how, like, all those important factors are actually in this packet. I actually don't see the need for the other one because it's a procedural issue, right? And it also speaks back to my directive on day one, absolutely 100% uncategorical, whatever. It is a staff, library staff responsibility to caretake this collection. It was one of my prompts. So there isn't a need for the board to create a policy which says staff need to watch or staff need to this, staff, because that's part of procedural behavior, which is, my goal here, right? To create a exceptional library district. So I do believe there is meat in this packet. That's the one thing. The second thing is mature content. The reason why I chose the word mature content collection is because mature content is even if you just Google mature content, right? It does have the meaning of stuff which requires a greater sense of maturity to deal with. And I don't think we should get necessarily in the business of assigning motivation. Like, even if we're looking at moral theology, if one wanted to, right? We don't have to probe motivation, right? So someone could be going, like Chaucer has mature content. I brought this up many times. I wouldn't say adult access only. I would say it's mature content. And so you should be more sexually mature, spiritually mature, whatever kind of maturity you want to call it. The room isn't going, or the room, it's not going to be only salacious material. First of all, some of that stuff, to be honest, probably shouldn't have been collected to begin with, right? I've been reviewing some of these things, and as a master of English literature and a master of library science, it doesn't take very long to realize that overall literary value is lacking, right? It checks all the boxes for legal review. So, I would actually like to consider that the trustees do think more carefully about what you actually call it, because that matters, right? The name we put on the room. I think to say adult access only prohibits the library from building a collection which may actually have value, rather than, it is not necessarily a negative. It is a negative thing what spawned it, obviously. But if we're going to have this thing 10 years from now, right, to really quality collection development by professional librarians over time, I think mature content collection makes a little more sense, because you could have, quality, even classic literature in there, which may have mature content. And you won't want to make someone go in there, and if someone is in there, I'm not going to immediately think, oh, that person's, right? Maybe that person has a reason to find a book about, sexuality, a nonfiction book, for reasons that they have, for whatever goes on in their married life, or this or that. Like, we're not going to get involved in motivations. That's not our job to judge that. I think mature content collection serves the purpose of the name. Right? Adult access only is being drawn out of the legal document and then put in quote marks and capitalized, but that's not what's in the legal document. They're not using the term in the way we're trying to use the term at the label. It's just in there as a bunch of adjectives describing the location. So, again, I'm willing to do whatever the trustees, I'm here to serve the board. But I just don't want to just toss off the idea that mature content collection is some way, deficient in describing what will be this collection.
Okay, trustee Hanley?
The term mature content collection is in several of these policies, these drafts. I'd rather not get hung up on the terminology, what we're gonna call it, and at the expense of getting anything done. So I can live with that name right now. If we want to change it later on, I don't know why we can't. But I think we agreed that that C stays in there because we didn't have the majority to take it out. And I think the only issue right now is the terminology of mature content collection, but it doesn't strictly apply to that. I've seen the term throughout several of these policies.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like it's failing consent. I would retract mine. I guess I'm fine with mature content collection. So, are we done with that? Trustee Bloss?
So I did look through all of the director's policies. The only place I see where there's something even referring to it is material selection acquisition policy. And there's this sentence that was added. So we went through in this policy a great extensive definition, which is broader included, and then it's also broader than the Idaho law. But then there's this new sentence, material with content being harmful to minors pursuant to Idaho codes 1813, 1415. Well, it should be 1517A and 1517B, but it just says B, if selected for purchase, will be located. Well, this document or this policy says we cannot buy it. So I don't know why it would even be saying if selected for purchase, because this is saying it's prohibited. But this is not a definition of the mature content collection. It's just saying if there are books bought, they're going to be put in this section. I don't see anywhere where we've defined in your policies what this is, and that's my objection. It's just going on and acting like it's defined. The board needs to define it, and the board needs to set the expectation that we in CLN and Idaho are completely adhering to the law, and we're setting an expectation that there's going to be such a location. Because the law says the books, it's the most critical part of the law. The law says these books that are relocated must be moved to the adult access only location. We have to define that. We can't just put a little sentence in our collection policy that a book that does this is going to be put there. But anyway, I don't want to go ahead with this until we have a policy that defines it.
Okay, so that suggestion did fail consensus though. So we can't defining that as you requested before. So if there's no objection, shall we move on to number 3?
Yes.
Okay, to number 3, be sure your child knows how to reach you. Is there any issues with that paragraph? Trustee Pennon?
Hopefully it's not confrontational. I want to add a comma somewhere in there. If you read partway through there, when you get to the black portion, in the event the library closes early, there probably should be a comma following the word early. Because it's an empty sentence, but it looks like it'll be appropriate there. I can read the whole sentence if necessary, but out loud, but I think a comma should go in there.
Doesn't need it with an R.
Yeah, it doesn't need it unless there's not 3 different clauses there. So I mean, you could, but I don't think.
It helps me read it, but I can do without it.
Okay, so anything else in section number 3? Okay, moving on to number 4, remember our closing times.
Okay.
I kind of preferred the he or she in there, just because I know that, in one of the classes that I viewed from the ALA, they were purposely encouraging people to basically neuter children, that there should be no concept of, he, she, boy, girl. So I would like to leave it as he or she. Is there, the second and third person on that? Trustee Henley?
I think it's consistent with the terminology throughout the rest of this document. I see the word child all over the place on this page. So I don't care if it goes to he or she, or if it stays the child, but the child is, the word is used all through this document, right? This particular policy right here.
Okay.
So I'm indifferent, I can read it.
Okay, I'm willing to drop it in the interest of time and getting something done. Okay, so we'll leave it as child, and if there's nothing else in number 4, we'll go on to number 5. Any issues there?
No.
None for me. Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the next draft policy, rules of conduct.
Did we need a motion to approve or?
No, because we would be, then, once we're done with all of them, then we would send them to the attorney for legal review. At this point, we kind of need to get through all of them first. We'll do that. Well, we're not approving any of the policies. We would be sending them for legal review first.
I need to approve it to send it.
Right, and so we can do that at the end and send all 4 or 5 or whatever of them at one time.
Individual.
Well, in going through the other ones, we might need to go back to the first one and change it again. So I think we should do it all at once. That would be the standard procedure, and they're all listed under the one, number 12. The agenda item number 12. So without objection, moving on to rules of conduct. I think we can, we'll do that by the whole first page. Is there any issues with that first
No.
page? Hearing none, we are moving on to page 2. Trustee Henley?
Just some small not grammatical so much. On page 2, paragraph 2, going down those different numbers 1 through 8. I see that they're not sentences and they don't have periods after them, but there is a period after number 6, probably needs to be deleted. Again, I'm being just technical nitpicky here, and the same thing with paragraph 7. And 8 may need it because there are 2 different phrases in there. That's up to the director, I don't really care. That could be a semicolon in there. Page 2, paragraph 2, we'll call it the big number 2.
Section.
1 through 8, just the,
Through 1 first.
We're doing the page.
we did a whole page just now, we're on page 2. We need a backup chair.
Yeah, maybe we should just start with the first section, so the first half of the page under number 1.
Which,
So on page 2,
page 2.
the big number 1 in bold, unsafe or disruptive. I had one question under for the director, if he would, under number 8 in that section, number 1. Would exchanging business cards be prohibited? Because that seems like a pretty normal thing that people do.
I don't think it would be interpreted in that.
Okay,
That would be.
All right. I'm satisfied and I have no other questions or issues with the entire big section number 1. Is anyone else?
No,
Trustee Floss?
So do we allow service animals? Do we allow dogs to come in now? And I would think there would have to be some kind of requirement if we did, that they had to be on a leash or something. I worked at a company that just loved to let people bring their dogs in, and they would sit at their desk, and the dog would wander around and pick over to a post and, urinate on the post, and I don't think we just want dogs coming into the library without some,
These are prohibited
these are-
items.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there's
Well,
ADA
said other-
guidelines requiring the animal the owner to maintain control.
other than service animals. What's,
yeah, so any
It's
animal other
prohibited.
than a service animal would be prohibited.
but is a service animal have to be on a leash, or can somebody just say, oh, it's my,
I think typically they have to wear their service animal vest. They would be official service animal. It wouldn't be, there's other degrees like therapy, yeah, like.
yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
no, this would be an official service animal.
And you can't require them to be tethered if the disability would prevent that. So the ADA has adopted the under the control standard. So they are required to be harnessed or leashed or tethered unless there's a disability related reason for that. And if you're a Title II or Title III entity, you have to let service animals in too. So there's a whole body of federal law that you could look to tweak your policy here if you need some language.
Do we need to add something to service animals? It has to be a specific type. It
No.
can't just be a,
It's understood.
I see people on the plane with their dogs that it's just, I forget what they call them, but it's to help them.
Yeah, emotional support, emotional support.
Yeah.
But I think because we use the terminology of service animal, it's implied that we're talking about the official certified and service animal that went through the process to become that.
Do we need more words than just service?
No.
Okay, any other issues with the first half of the page under unsafe or disruptive?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to section 2, inappropriate use of library privileges or property, that entire section, that page.
I have one question on that.
Trustee Ambrossetti?
Yes, Chair. Where are the designated food areas?
I don't know. They would be branch specific.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they would be branch specific and then
Outside.
Because there's no place inside the building here where you eat, right?
I have chocolate.
I mean, yeah, programs during here, there'd be food, I'd have to look at each branch and see what they are.
Okay.
Okay, I had a question on number 7, photographing or recording for professional or commercial purposes, or photographing or recording children under the age of 18 prohibited without prior written position or permission. Would that prohibit media, being in here recording our meetings?
Well, I think these rules of conduct are applying to library operations more so than board meetings.
Okay,
But even, I mean, if the media wanted to do something in the library, they would still reach out first and then. Sort of fit the meeting process.
okay, I'm satisfied that I just wanted to make sure. Anything else in that whole section 2 there? Okay, then without objection, we're moving on to page 3. Under number 3, illegal. Any issues with any of that?
I'm good.
I'm good. Trustee Ambrossetti?
I don't mean to keep beating a dead horse on this Wi-Fi issue, but if they, I tell you what, let me back up on that, because I was really kind of appalled when I heard that the Wi-Fi wasn't filtered. I don't know why I expected it to be. But now we have one other issue, and that is suppose someone comes in, I think it should be in here, accessing pornography on 5G, on their 5G, they can do that. If they have a device and they're sitting in here and they're trying to get around, they want to go in and look at something, they're trying to get around the filters that we have, such as they are. We also have the possibility that a child could be walking by when someone is looking at pornography on his 5G.
Number 7 covers it.
It also says examples, including but not limited to.
Maybe it should be all pornography, not child. Maybe we don't limit it to child.
That's a good idea. Yeah, and that'll cover
Okay, so just taking out the word child and leaving the rest of it as is.
See the director, okay, but
I'm good with that. So it sounds like we have at least 3, which would be consensus. Okay, anything else under section number 3, illegal, or should we move on to number 4?
4.
Okay, hearing, trustee Bloss?
We're back to 10. We've added this in now without parental or legal guardian accompaniment. And I prefer that we not say that, just minors accessing content collection.
So period after the word collection?
Yeah, I don't know why we have to go around telling people it's okay for parents to bring them in.
Does that still work for the library if we put a period after the word collection?
I guess I'll have to wait for legal to tell me what impact it has on procedure. Like, if it's not in the policy, that's fine. Minors accessing mature content collection is not permitted. That's fine. I want to know whether it is or isn't legal for the parent to accompany them into this segregated section. Like, there are some places that, I guess in the world where, you could go in, I don't know, if it's a nice restaurant, but it's a bar and I can't take my young kids in, I want to have their burger. They could say I can't go in there with the child. So it doesn't really matter to me what this document says about this. What it's going to matter to me significantly is how to affect the procedure. Are we or are we not allowing parents to bring their minor into the segregated area? If we are, I don't see any harm in saying it. That's just a clear, why not be transparent? I mean, we don't have to advertise it, but that's fine. But that's not my concern at this moment. My concern is I'd like clarity as to whether or not we are or not allowing parents to bring their minors into the segregated area.
Okay, trustee Hanley?
Well, I think if council tells us that we do have to allow a child in the areas if they're accompanied, I think it's good to have that clarified in the policy because the clarity on that, the decision or the interpretation by council is only as good as our memories right now and the staff's. This way, a person down in Harrison, a staff member doesn't have to call the director and say, hey, I got a parent who wants to come over here and accompany their kid or bring their kid over here. I think it's good to just, might as well clarify it and make it clear. And if we don't have to do a follow-up question a year or 2 years from now to ask, well, the parent wants to bring their kid over to this other section. So I think if we learn that it is legal, we ought to just leave it in there, but we don't, that's fine. Again, I want to get stuff done today. Thank you. You probably got that idea.
Trustee Bloss?
So it doesn't belong here, in my opinion. It belongs in a policy about mature collection. I think this is just an example, just a simple example, and this is very clear if you just give it an example and leave the without parental legal part of it off. You're just confusing things by adding this. It's a legal defense for the library. We're not going to get prosecuted. Legal action can't be taken against us if a parent comes there. But this policy that I want needs to say that the librarian needs to go over there and get this paper signed, just like what's in the Idaho law. And we're not saying any of that. So let's just leave it out. But I want the policy to define this. Without the policy, it's just memory of what we passed, with our motion last month and what we said we wanted. It needs to say how it's run and what the expectation is. And the only way we should be allowing a parent in there is if the librarian goes over and talks to them and gets the paper signed, because that's in the Idaho law saying that that's what we need to do. But I think it should come out. This is just an example.
Okay, so we could take it out and then when it goes through the legal review, if we're told that we need to put it back in, then we can do that at that time. So it looks like we have two who would definitely like to just put a period after the word collection and remove the rest of the sentence. We have a third, trustee Ambersetti.
I know it's gonna sound as if I'm trying to be pedantic again, but the wording, if you go back and look, I just don't like this mature content collection. If you go back and look at last month's um, actual motion, we do use the word adult access only. That was what we all voted on, not on mature content collection. So that's what we need to make everything agree with, what we voted on last week, not mature content collection. Now, I know, as trustee Hanley correctly pointed out, that there are places where it's referred to as such, but those can be taken out. We haven't even gotten to the card. That's where it's mentioned 3 times on the card issues. We can take it out of there and put in what we all voted on or what passed last time. I just want to be consistent, that's all. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Sure.
Yes.
This illustrates that the farther you delve into getting granular and into operations in a policy, the harder it's going to be able to agree on something. So take on the one hand, what's required? The board could say simply, we have a policy that directs our director to comply with Idaho law. Maybe that's sufficient. That's over here on one side of policymaking authority. And then getting to this side where we are telling the director what to call the area that would meet that section under 2, where we're taking the reasonable steps to restrict access. It doesn't actually say that a child can't access it. It just says we have to take reasonable steps to prevent it, right? And the other side of the liability point is we gave it or made it available. So you could make the entire library adult access only. You can only come in with parental permission. That's one side of the extreme, right? And the other side is children can't access that area. And so just keep that in mind. Don't let this statute tail wag the dog, right? And so I agree with some of the comments about what we call it is very important and we don't want to advertise things. But there is a substantial amount of operations that the director will do that doesn't need the hand holding, right? And so I would encourage the board to maybe kind of take a step back and reassess what level you're on right now. Are we on policy making level or are we delving into operational level? Because the more we delve into operation, the harder it's going to be to work out these details. That's what we want him to do. And come back and decide, does this, whatever you call it, is it not working? And let's change it, right? That's what you do as him being your employee. You're not fulfilling our policy, right? So I feel like we're kind of getting into operations a little bit. If we're going to say we're calling it this, the board should just be saying, create this. Does that make sense?
Yes, well, it already did, the mature, changing it, the name of mature content collection already failed consensus, and it sounds like it also failed consensus to drop the last part of the sentence and just end it with the period after the word collection. Trustee Boss?
I want to reiterate, this is not how we would do what the legal counsel is saying. We need to define, we need to have a policy, even if it's simple, like what he's saying, follow this law and implement these steps. But this is scattering our intent, the board's intent, sticking it in this example and sticking it in this footnote and sticking it in another policy on the purchasing. And that's not the way to define what the content, how it operates and what it is. We need a policy on that. It is the most critical part of the Idaho law, and just to define it as, part of an example. What are we doing about legal guardian and so forth? We need to have that in the policy. And we can allow different things on how the board or the administration implements it, but I think we should be saying, should it be in every library or should it only be in 2 libraries? We need to give direction and expectation And this is not the way to do it by having it in footnotes and examples.
Trustee Henley?
I'm not sure we need a separate standalone policy. As the director said, it appears to me that the whole, the new law is integrated throughout. It's covered in these policies. If you go through these, this ends up making it where children don't have access to material harmful to minors. And so I tend to think that the issue is addressed. It's already covered as far as conduct and rules of conduct that do with the library cards and so forth. I think these policies covered properly, but I don't think we're on your draft policy right now. I think we're on this. So I agree with the chair that just, I'm fine with putting a period at the end of mature content collection.
Okay, so then we do have consensus on that.
I'm indifferent. I don't, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, different to me.
All right, well then we had consensus. We're putting a period after mature content collection and removing the rest of that sentence.
What about the asterisks?
Don't have to come out.
Uh,
If I may just.
Director?
The packet, like I said, the packet, the way I'm delivering it is meant to satisfy everything we need to move forward. That doesn't mean that once I do move forward with the room or this section of shelving that was, approved at the last meeting, that doesn't mean at that point we can't resuscitate the draft that deals with that segregated entity. My objection to some of the draft is that it's actually procedural and it's not policy, which is another way for me to say that if we get through all this and I can move in a direction, and let's say that room in Post Falls that I have my eye on, talk about, becomes the Post Falls area where they have the mature content collection. At that point in time, I can bring to the trustees, here, this is the internal organizational procedures for this room, right? Here's the signage I'm gonna put on the door. Here's the layout of that room. Here's the total linear foot of shelving that I'm gonna have in that room. So that's all what I would do as the director. I think that we can get through this policy packet and move it on to legal. And it doesn't preclude the potential that at some point in time, we're looking at a policy for that entity, which is the segregated area approved last time. So doesn't preclude the possibility of fleshing out a procedure or even a policy, right, regarding that thing. But you still want it to manifest itself in all these particular packets. So like this footnote is important here because it's in this particular policy, and it doesn't preclude the creation of a future one based on the room itself or the show. Because it may be a room in Post Falls. I'd like it to be a room in Post Falls. Could be a room in Hayden. Could be both. That might be enough in the short term. Ends up being a shelving area in Harrison because of the size. So it could be a lot of different things moving forward. And that can all be procedural and be worked out, even if this policy packet's approved with the wording the way it is. So that's all. Like I'm not trying to suggest that shelving trustee Plaza's draft is not at all. I think everything that's in that draft is in here. I think there's a lot of procedural stuff in the draft, which I guarantee will be the procedural type of things that I'm going to do here as the director. So just to speak back to council, I mean, I do want you to at least, use the word trust, right? That I'm here, to serve the trustees and create the greatest library district in North Idaho. So even all of Idaho. But some things are procedural, and I want to reassure the trustees that the procedural things don't have to be in here for you to be confident that I will move the library in the direction that we want it to go.
Okay, and so it would be best to keep the asterisk.
We didn't keep that whole sentence. I'm sorry. I'd like to reverse and say, I would like to keep it as is in number 10, the whole thing, because it ties into the asterisk, and that does integrate the whole idea of the adult access or mature content. So I'm reversing my suggestion to scratch that. So I'm okay with 10 as it stands. because it attaches to the asterisk down below, which helps to define things.
Okay, trustee Ambrosati?
Well, 2 points. First, I have to disagree respectfully with trustee Hanley because the without parental or legal guardian accompaniment has nothing whatsoever to do with 18, 15, 17B unless you go in and read it and see that these poor librarians are going to be over getting signed documents from these people trying to take the time away from their real jobs and having them go over and saying, oh, are you really this person's guardian? So that's the first thing is we don't need those words after collection. I agree with what we voted on. But the second thing is, are we going, Chair, to go through trustee Ploss's paper here? Because I do disagree on certain things that the director said. I don't see any micromanagement in this, which I'm assuming is what you mean by procedural. So I would like to go through that if we do have the time. If we
Okay,
have the time.
we can't because it wasn't on the agenda.
Oh.
For transparency, the public needs to know what's going to be on the agenda so they can decide whether they're going to come or not. Okay, so it sounds like now we have a different three
Yeah.
consensus.
I'm reversing again. Can I double
Okay.
reverse?
So, okay, so.
No, I
it will
like
say-
what he said.
It will say minors accessing the mature content collection period
Yes,
asterisk.
yes.
Okay, so,
I'm okay with that.
okay, we have consensus on that. That will be changed.
That's a good idea.
All right, trustee Platts, do you have?
Just to bring this up again, to clarify with trustee Hanley, the only place it even talks about parents being able to do it is in the legal defense. So it really has nothing to do with the footnote. It's just, that's how we get out of being sued if a parent does do it. So we shouldn't be pointing that out.
Okay, well, we've had consensus on that, so, anyway.
Therefore,
So without objection, we'll move on to number 4, non-compliance with staff. Anything there?
no,
None for me?
None.
Okay, hearing none. Okay, and we decided to keep the asterisk, so we kind of already agreed to that. Any problems with things that are crossed out at the bottom there? Shall we move on to the next policy?
yes.
Okay, without objection, moving on to the next policy, library cards for minors policy. Okay, so again, we'll go seriatim. Anything in between the title and the word regulations that is in bold over on the left?
No,
I'm good with everything there. Okay, there's no objection. We will move on. Okay.
Which thing are you saying?
Okay, so the
First paragraph.
top portion from the title, library cards for minors policy, all the way down. So the first paragraph, basically. Is that all good? Okay, without objection, moving on to regulations. Any issues there? Trustee Ambrosati?
Thank you, Chair. The first question, it's a lead into my comments, is the ILS or the network, the virtual card catalog that now, I think it's called ILS. Is that, when you go in there, aren't there still descriptions of those books in there? In other words, if someone went in to look at 50 Shades of Gray, wouldn't there be a description of that in there and it's not filtered, right?
Yeah, I mean, you first, you'll first get a list of just all the title. And if you click on the title you want, then you'll get a bigger record. It could have a summary depending on if it's in there for the record. Typically, those summaries are not going to be explicit. They're going to just be generic plot summaries. So the record that it's pulling from will have fields. Sometimes you get summaries for fiction work, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you like nonfiction, you might get full table of contents, you might not. So it just depends on the work.
So that was the lead into my question about why we need three levels. It seems to me excessively complicated, and I know that, this has been done, I suppose, for a while. I'm thinking back that, why can't we just have a minor and an adult? Why does it have to be four different levels of cards?
Three.
Oh, no, four with adult.
Oh.
Right.
Well, but this is the library cards for minors policy, so we're
Right,
only
but I'm
dealing
saying
with minors.
overall, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to have three levels for, I don't understand why, I see what it says, nor can it be used for ebooks, streaming content, online databases, and then down below, there's the one that's complete open access, but, if there isn't this salacious concern we have about the descriptions, and they're going to access the ILS in any event, why are we concerned about having these? That's my only question. I don't understand it.
Well, it gives the parents a choice that they can control the level that they have. But I did have an issue with number 4C, open access card for minors, because when I was on after the HB 374, is that what it was, passed about the harmful materials to minors, there was an Idaho Commission for Libraries conference call, and it was brought up in that call that it would actually be the library that is giving access to kids, they would be the ones held responsible. So it seems like number 4C leaves us legally liable for anything that a child gets from another library system. Trustee Helmy?
I suggest we strike C entirely. I don't see a need for it. I think we have a limited access card for minors and we have a general access card for minors. And those to me look like they're sufficient. I don't see why we have C at all. When I went through this, my suggestion is to strike it in its entirety.
Thank you for finishing my sentence, Sarah. Trustee Blas?
So yes, I completely agree. We cannot offer C because this would give them minors access to Washington libraries that don't have the Idaho law. So Liberty Lake, another Washington library, it'd give them access to Coeur d'Alene Library that doesn't seem to be following the Idaho law. So C is not an option for minors. What I was going to say on A, I'm a little confused because we used to have 3 levels for minors and children and youth. Does that go up through 14? And then somehow or another, we had another level that went up through 16, and then there wasn't the level. Then the next level was somehow or another, they were defined as adults. So anybody over 16 got access to the adults. So I think there should be a minor card that gives them access to everything 17 and down. I don't think that's what youth, is that what youth and children's is?
I think that's option A.
So it's very simple. A says that the parent is giving a library card that gives the child access to everything for minors, 17 up to 17, yeah. Because we're not, I took out the whole idea of a gradation of minor because a lot of them have one. So, and that's not how the collection is held, and it's going to play out. So A is simply a library card for minors that gives them access to all the collections for minors. That's it. B is what we talked about before. It's the general collection. They have access to everything in a CLN building except the segregated entity. Okay, and C is just a carryover from before where we're saying it's everything but not mature content. But they also get the CIN component. That's up to the trustees. If legal's fine with what they decide. It's not a deal breaker for me. Our CIN is a different story, something that I'm assessing anyway, but, and it's important to note that a lot of what it talks about in those other exceptions, we're talking about electronic, which a parent with a card, the child, if the parent wants to give them the code to get into the database, they just use their card, the parent's card. So it matters, but, if the trustees wish to strike C, that's not a deal breaker as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so it sounds like we had a consensus of 3 or 4, on removing C. Okay, so if there is no objection, we'll move on to the back page.
No changes by me.
Okay, I don't have anything in mind with it. Okay, trustee Platts.
On page, what does it mean for, a parent can have their own library card? Have the card of their children linked to their own, I guess they need the parent's card. What does that mean, linked to it?
That way the parent could see what the child checked out, know when it's due, that kind of thing. Otherwise, they would have no access, they would have no idea when their child's books are due. Anything else, Charlie?
Yeah, no, the linking is referring to what's happening in the ILS, so at the CERT desk, you see that this card was like a link with the family, so it gives the ability to see circulation. It does not linking the card in any way, creating access to that other card beyond what that card rightfully has as access. It just refers to circulation. Kind of data that can now be seen by the parent.
So the parent would log into CLN and look at their own card activity, and they would see the child's. How would they know, if they want to know what is my child been checking out? Did they get an email? How do they know what the child's been checking out?
That's going to be a question I got to pursue with IT. My gut feeling is based on my experience that it's actually just at the circulation testing we're seeing on the back end. Like it's a linked card. And so if the parent's there, let's say the parent comes in on the phone and they say, hey, can you tell me what my child has out right now? Because I think I spotted 10 books in bed. And so because it's linked, the staff person can give that information. If it wasn't linked, then the staff person sorry can't give out. Right? So it's the linking at the ILF behind the scenes. I'm not actually sure what they can do in Koha. Koha is the name for the public facing catalog. When they log into their barcode and password, my gut feeling is that they don't see the other person's barcode. So I think it's more active circulation. I can verify that, but it's totally related to being able to see circulation, what's out, when it's due, right? Because that ties back to the whole idea that the parents are responsible for any fines, incurred kind of thing.
Okay, so without objection, we will move on to the next policy on the list, which is material selection and acquisition policy. So are there any issues with page 1, which was left exactly as is?
No,
Okay. Okay, okay, so on page 1.
I would like to make other changes to this, and I don't want to slow the process down by doing that, but I think we should add other types of material in here, such as anti-police, abortion, rape. Anyway, they're not protected class by the Supreme Court.
Is that on page 1?
I'm just saying in general, but I'll save it for later,
Okay,
but I would like to enhance this.
okay.
And if now's the time to go just add some other things, I'm just be listing some of these words.
Okay, so without objection, we will move on to page 2.
No changes.
No changes?
No changes.
Okay, without objection, we will move on to page 3. Trustee Hanley?
Can't speak for the director, but the green added section there, I think it leaves us an easy way for the staff to move material that's already in the collection. I think that would permit that. It would permit them to move a book or piece of material if a purchase is made and in error, or they find out later on, hey, wow, there was some other garbage in this book, they can move it. Because the question might be, well, how can it be in our selection process? Why are we saying the material harmful to minors is going to be moved to the mature content area? Because I think errors happen, and it gives us a policy there. And my last guess on the reason for having this in here would be a possibility if a parent insists on buying some book and there's some threat of a lawsuit if you don't get it because it's prejudicial. Well, we buy it and we stick it in the mature collection again. So I think in my mind, reading this, there are 3 different scenarios that could take place in order to deem this necessary to be put in there. And it just said that if the material is deemed harmful to minors, according to all these different statutes, if it's selected for purchase, it'll be located in the mature collection. So anyway, I'm basically saying, I'm agreeing with it being there.
Okay, yeah, I don't like it, but I agree with what you said. Trustee Blas? Oh. Sorry, who's first?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I was just gonna say quickly that I don't think it belongs here at all, but it does belong in the withdrawal policy. Because the withdrawal policy is what we're doing with books we already have. And I don't pull that up, but these books cannot be bought by this policy. So I think we're trying to slip a definition of what the mature content collection is in by just sticking it in little bits and pieces. I repeat, I want a specific policy defining mature content collection, and I don't like doing it this way.
Great, so I suspect that we may have to extend the meeting, but if everyone could try to keep their comments as concise as possible, maybe we could still have a possibility of getting through this today. Director?
So I just want to say that this blue green paragraph there relates to the paragraph above it. The policy saying, and I'm grateful for the policy, this is a new policy, I didn't touch it very much because it was all done by the board here. Material with content that is material inappropriate to minors as defined in this policy will be excluded from the library juvenile teen young adults section. If I don't put this other paragraph in, it means that there's no reference to what I do with the adult collection. And this is, the reason it's here is because of the decision made last time. I need it here because it means that if selected for purchase, in other words, if we select something that's going to go for adults, it's a given that the paragraph above stands. We are not collecting things targeted to minors that break the law. Well, we still have to collect things. We're still, if there's a new book that comes out about the joy of sex, for example, which is legitimate, fair and good, but it's mature. And if it's deemed appropriate to be selected for the adults of our community, I'm just saying that if it's deemed harmful to minors, and we still have to collect it, or by our professional standard, we would collect it.
For adults.
It's for adults, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't say it's for kids. The paragraph above it already dictates that this paragraph below cannot apply to kids. The reason that's why it's there. It's there to be able to enable us to continue to purchase materials which are deemed harmful to minors. We knew that ahead of time because we weren't buying it for minors. We're buying it for the collection, and it's going to be located in the mature content collection. It's a very benign statement. It's just simply saying that in this policy, which is great, we will not collect things that are inappropriate for minors, but we do collect things that may be inappropriate for minors, but the intention is to have them for the general population of adults. But we also have the policy and everything in place that says that that stuff, if we do collect it, is in the mature content collection, which is a segregated entity. So there's nothing really there that's too nefarious. Nothing underhanded. I'm not trying to slip things in. I'm just simply saying that, okay, I still have to buy things which will be considered mature content for children because we have adults in our community. And we've agreed, based on last month, that if we have that stuff, it's put in a segregated entity, fine. But I have to have that paragraph in there. And the most important words in that paragraph are in the little phrase there, if selected for purchase. I'm just saying that if we happen to have to select an item for purchase, which is deemed harmful to minors, it's not going to minors, it's going in the mature content collection. That's all that's really doing.
Okay, Trustee Foss?
So it would have helped me if I would seen after the word purchase, if selected for the adult collection. I think that would clarify it. I don't know if otherwise, to me, it looks like this is trying to define what the mature content collection is. And I don't like trying to define it in the middle of another policy, but if it's selected for purchase for the adult collection, this would be my offers.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't be going into the adult collection. It would be going into the mature content.
I was respecting the last meeting where we kind of veered away from the word adult collection towards the general collection. So to me, exactly what you're saying, Trustee Fox, is what I'm saying. It's implied that if it's selected for purchase, it's going to the mature content collection. Now, then I guess the argument would be, well, are we buying materials for minors to go in the mature content collection? That's a totally different animal because obviously it's obvious that there are going to be things in the mature content collection because I already have them in the collection and I can't get them out of the collection, which is fine. They're all on the 140 items coming in. They're going to the mature content collection. So the mature content collection, that segregated entity, will have material in it now, that is to say, currently in the collection, which was published for mine. It could even be a board book. If there's a board book out there, which is objectionable to minors, and it comes across my path, and I have to put it in the mature content collection, it's going to exist. This sentence is just simply saying, if I'm in the future, because this is not the withdrawal, this is the collection policy, as we move forward with collections, if I'm purchasing material that is deemed harmful to minors, it's going in that segregated entity. It doesn't really say much more than that.
Okay, so I would like to leave it as is in the interest of time.
Agreed.
Okay, looks like we have consensus on leaving it as is. All right, anything else on that page, or should we move on to the next page?
Next policy.
Or, well,
Is there another page?
yeah.
Oh, maybe on page.
Okay,
I
so
already approved that one.
any issues on page 4?
No,
And for me? Without objection, we are moving on to the next one, which is a request for relocation of material form. Anything on page 1? Just leaving it exactly as it already was. Hearing none, moving on to page 2. Very minor little change there. I'm good with it.
objection from me.
Okay, Trustee Boss?
I guess since we're reviewing this, I want to look at it more critically. Are we excluding a member of the public in this, in answering these questions? Are we excluding a member of the public who's not a parent or not a minor from submitting the form? I don't think we are. They still submit the form. They just answer no. If they're the parent or the minor. So I don't think there's anything wrong. But anyway, this is what I intended, was to make a form that was available to anybody. But see something, find something, say something. I don't care if you're not a parent, just say something. I think you don't need to make any changes to make that happen.
Okay, so is there any issues with page 2?
Okay.
Okay, I'm here. Without objection, we're moving on to page 3. Don't have anything there. Trustee Henley?
A question in general on this particular policy, does anywhere on here show the timeline, when it has to be turned in or turned back? And the reason I bring that up is because earlier the director indicated he has some books already. And so it's like, maybe we'll put an exception, say if the book is already under legal review or whatever we called it there, that the 14-day thing doesn't apply because it's already in the works. Maybe, but I don't know where that is, but I think there was a timeline somewhere.
Policy, not the form.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. I have no changes to page 3.
Okay, anyone else? No? Okay, without objection, oh, well, there we are, blank page 4. Okay, so without objection, we are moving on to the next one, which is, oh, that's all of them.
So
Okay.
that's a first.
Awesome. And yes, Trustee Boss?
Why can't we discuss this? Because it was part of the set of policies we were discussing. And the director chose to leave it out. This was part of what we said in our motion, that we wanted this, I'm pretty sure it was in the motion, but we wanted to take care of the minor card policy, or minor cards and adult access. And those two were the main policies.
Okay, I didn't think to put it in there either because we asked him to make changes and he did kind of incorporate the library addressing these issues in the other policy drafts that we've just gone through. And this was not on, since it wasn't on this agenda, it would be unfair to the public who might want to come and comment on that, but they didn't know it was going to be on the agenda because it wasn't on the agenda.
Can we consider it for next number 14 on the agenda?
We could,
No.
or
Oh, I'm sorry.
when we get to, yeah,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
it could be on a future
Yeah.
agenda, certainly. And I'm kind of a soft opinion at this point that it might not be necessary, and unless we see a problem, it might not be necessary. Trustee Boss?
So I am not going to approve the package we have when it comes back because I am emphatic, we need a policy defining this, it's critical. So go review it, but I think you should have a special meeting to discuss this and then get it added to his review package.
Okay. Well, then, at this point, I would entertain a motion to send the policy packet that was on the agenda to our attorney for legal review.
So moved.
Say, okay, it has been moved to send the policy packet to our attorney for legal review. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have 3 ayes and 1 nay. So the motion is carried, and the policy packet will go to the attorney for legal review. All right, so moving on to number 13, response to public comment. I did have one. So some said that we should have filled the recent trustee vacancy based on diversity of viewpoint. One, I wonder if these same people pressured the CDA, city council, or other liberal boards to fill vacancies with a conservative for diversity of thought. Two, by diversity, do they mean we should bring back the frequent hostility and dysfunction that was directed at the board majority that brought our CLN work to a near halt and compelled having multiple extra meetings per month for nearly a year just so we could get our work done? Three, everyone here thinks differently and we frequently disagree with each other. Four, plenty of different viewpoints are expressed through written and public comments, and we do consider them. Five, now that voters are aware of what's been slipping under the radar for decades, they've made it abundantly clear that they don't want children exposed to illegal, sexually explicit materials that destroy kids' well-being and stability. And six, it would be completely ridiculous for us to choose someone in complete opposition to what needs to be done to make the library safe for families again and against the latest vote of the people. That's all I had. Anyone else?
No.
No. Okay. All right, so moving on to number 14, discussion of future agenda requests. Are there any?
No.
Trustee Bloss?
I would like a special meeting to go over the, adult access only policy. Mark it up. You're planning to go with these.
Okay, Trustee Henley?
I would recommend if we are going to entertain it, that if we do it at the next regular meeting, have a special meeting.
Yeah, so actually, yeah, this is just the future agenda requests. We would get to the special meetings under number 15. So right now we're just dealing with, do you guys want to discuss the adult access only policy draft? Trustee Ambersetti?
I would be willing to come an extra meeting, special. Are we talking about special meeting?
No, anytime.
Oh, this is for any agenda.
Yeah, so just right now,
Okay.
just discussing the adult access only policy draft.
I would like to discuss, trustee Ploss's draft document. Not now necessarily, but soon.
Okay, so, and I'm sorry, Trustee Henley, were you for discussing the adult access only at a future meeting?
At a future meeting, yeah, not necessarily a special meeting. I'm open to it.
Okay, so we have three, that's consensus, and so that will be on a future meeting. All right, Trustee Bloss?
Well, I've got a number of things I would like us to get the ball rolling on. But to have discussion on what we would like for the new strategic plan. And give the director some direction on what we'd like to do. Like to talk about what I mentioned on the material acquisition, about adding some of the non-protected groups. Like policies on video games and internet usage. Well, maybe we've done the internet usage, but anyway, I'm worried about video games sliding under, there's no policy governing, as far as I can tell, governing the material harmful to minors. I don't know whether, anyway, these are topics that I'd like to discuss with the.
Okay,
with
do
the
you
board.
want us to decide by consensus at this point, or are you just kind of putting it out there for us to think about?
I'd like to get it on the list.
Okay, all right, so do we have consensus on strategic plan direction?
No.
I would be a yes.
Is it open for I mean, at some future date, but I mean, we can just give the director so many things to do on time. We're just putting a library together, we're getting him in his new office. We got all these policies rolling down the pike. I'm not sure we're trying to fit these in.
Put them on
Do
the,
we need to have a separate discussion or another meeting? What are all these things and what sequence and what priorities they are? Because I'm not sure how we're approving this. So I don't want to say yes or no. The director has his hand up.
Okay, Director? Oh, actually, I'm sorry, we need to extend the meeting.
I move to extend the meeting 10 minutes.
Okay, it has been moved to extend the meeting 10 minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, the meeting is extended 10 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Director.
Oh, I just wanted to say that the 2026-2030 strategic plan is on the agenda for calendar, on the agenda, she said, it's on the calendar for January. Anyway, so there are, yeah, there are things that are already on, like policies and things, and that's flexible, but yeah, it's already on. But
Thanks for pointing that out. That makes it a lot easier. Okay, so, video game policy, do we have anyone else interested in that?
But it's covered by electronic stuff in the policies.
Well,
Trustee Amberseti?
I'd like to wrap that into the entire, I'm still shocked that we don't have filtering on our Wi-Fi. I'd like to wrap that into the entire issue of no filtering and what kind of things are being accessed in the way of video games. I think it's important to see. I mean, you know, all we have to do is look in the headlines to see kind of an effect video games have on youngsters, as we saw the other day. So, yes, I would like to see it.
Trustee Glass?
all I'm asking is, let's have a discussion, put it on the agenda and have a topic discussion. And maybe before the meeting, the director can bring in where it would be covered or one of us look at it. I'm just concerned that it's going under the wire and I'd like to have a discussion on what we can do about it. So it's a discussion, it's not necessarily a policy, where it's maybe adding it to a policy.
Okay, so we could possibly just have an introductory discussion on it to figure out what direction we want to go, Director?
just for my own clarification, there's video games that are hard copy discs or whatever that get played in devices like PlayStation. And then there's online video games. Which one are we referring to? Are we referring to the, because there's two, that would be collections. And that's one would be like internet use. They could be two different, completely different locations. One is a collection issue. Are we collecting video games? What are the rules around that? Or are we talking, I think Trustee Amjad was talking more about internet games. So they're sitting at the terminal and they're downloading Roblox or Minecraft and they're playing a video game. So I just don't know which one because I can roll that question about terminal computer games on site into my discussions with IT, when we're even gonna be talking about Wi-Fi, right? And whether should we password protected filter, so that's fine. I get into that. If we're talking about collection development, video game, that's a totally different discussion. So I just want to make sure I know which one.
That's possible.
So I want it all covered. And I don't know whether we have it in the collections. I mean, on the selection and acquisition, we did give a hero selection and acquisition. We gave a very specific definition. Serial means any book, magazine. So I don't know whether video games is on this. Any book, magazine, newspaper, pamphlet, poster, front picture, figure, image, description, motion picture, film, record, recording tape, CD-ROM disc, magnetic disc memory, magnetic tape memory, videotape, other media, or other downloadable or on digital content. If it's covered in that, then we can't buy it if it's material harmful to minors. But I don't know whether whether we need to modify this in a video game.
Well, I would say you don't have to modify the ones Trustee Ambrosetti is referring to, because that would be any downloadable or online digital. And theoretically, if they're downloading a game, they're playing it with a keyboard kind of thing. But I guess if you go through that list, I mean, it doesn't specifically say video games, so if I wanted to throw that in there.
This is for purchase.
This is collective development, which is different than what I'm talking about with internet use, so.
I just want to make sure we're covered. So if you could review it before the discussion.
Okay, trustee Pan?
I can better agree or disagree to add these things to future agendas as long as we're not agreeing it's the next agenda.
Right.
Then I'm much more flexible. Sure, we can throw them all out there. So I'm making sure I understand what I'm agreeing or disagreeing. So if we want to look at those, that's fine. I have no problem with that.
Okay, yeah, that's just sometime in the future, as soon as convenient, I would agree to all of them. Oh, yes, business manager?
Just to clarify for our notes, on Mr. Ploss's recommendation for a following topic, I had material acquisition adding some of the protected groups, but I'm not confident that's what. Could you, because we went over the material selection and acquisition policy today. Could you clarify what you'd like me to put in notes, please?
I don't know if we agreed to that, but the proposal was to add other topics, which would be non-protected groups. In other words, they're not protected groups by the Supreme Court. So it would be, my examples are rape, abortion, suicide, anti-police, racism, violence, drugs. Anyway,
I might begin into content.
if we don't buy that kind of material, and I don't think we're prohibited by the Supreme Court saying that. Because they're not, it's not like we're saying it's gender,
Okay.
religion.
All right, so yeah, we're not debating it right now. We're just, like, this is gonna be on a future. So I believe that we had consensus on adding those at some point in the future, when convenient. Okay, so without objection, we will move on to number 15, set special and regular meeting dates.
That's there. They're already on the second page. Are we just agreeing?
Oh, well, if we're going to add any more.
Oh, no comment.
Trustee Foss?
I would like a special meeting the first week of January to go over the adult access. Maybe some of the other things next on the list. I don't know what's next highest priority, but we're losing valuable time before the next election. And if I'm understanding, legal counsel will come back on the 16th, the regular meeting, with information about these policies that we just went through today. So I would like this other one added to his list, or a modified version of it. So.
I think that I've developed an allergy to special meetings, so I would rather do that in a regular meeting if we can.
Too late. If he's giving it by the 16th, if he's giving his results, it's too late.
Okay, other,
No. I'll make a comment, if it's okay.
okay, trustee Hammond?
I think that the policies that we just went through are not dependent upon the draft that trustee Plus wants to discuss. So I see no reason why we can't still look at that someday, but in the absence of that draft, doesn't invalidate the policies we just went through. So, and I don't want a special meeting, no.
Okay. Just trustee Ambrosetti?
Well, as the new person, I would be open to another meeting, a special meeting. I'd be willing to do whatever it takes to get this ironed out, but I think I'm sensing it's gonna be like 2-2, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, if everyone is still of the same opinion, a special meeting has failed consensus. So then without objection, we'll move on to number 16, adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
It has been moved to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. We are now adjourned.